We pick up where the Assembly agreed that we would, which is appointment of committees, and this is an appointment to the Jersey Police Authority. The reason that we left this over to this afternoon is because I gave an indication that it was recognised that serving on the authority and serving on the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel could represent a conflict of interest. I have reviewed that matter over the lunch and adjournment. It's clear that whereas one member who was appointed to both that panel and to the authority in years gone by took the view that was a conflict of interest and accordingly resigned from one, there's never been a formal ruling to that effect. In my view, because the statute provides for people who may not sit, it is not really open to me, other than the most obvious case, to declare that there is a conflict of interest or not, as the case may be. So I do not think that there is certainly a conflict of interest, but what I would say is that matters of conflict of interest in any respect are always matters for those seeking to hold the office in particular as to whether they believe they have a conflict or they do not. And of course, in the context of an election, how the Assembly votes. And those are the, so I withdraw that observation relating to the conflict of interest, and I invite the Minister to propose who the Minister wishes.
Thank you, sir. I would firstly like to thank those that actually showed an interest, of which there was 4, and I would like to nominate Deputy Miles as the representative for the Jersey Police Authority.
Is the nomination seconded? Are there other nominations? Well, if there are no other nominations, then in this fiercely contested battle, I can announce that Deputy Miles has been confirmed and duly appointed as a member of the Jersey Police Authority. Very well, we now move on to public business.
Sir, if I may, just before we move on to public business, just want to clarify from an answer I gave in questions without notice earlier about the marine spatial plan and fish processing plants. It's been brought to my attention that fish processing facilities do appear in the marine spatial plan, and I wasn't sure at the time. I didn't recall that that was the case, but it is so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. Yes, very well. The first item is reporting on ministerial activities, P71, lodged by Deputy Moore, and the main respondent will be the Chief Minister. Deputy, you have also lodged an amendment to your proposition, and I assume you wish to take it read as amended.
Yes, please, sir.
And I assume that members are content that we may take the proposition as amended. Very well. I'll ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Chief Minister to update the codes of conduct and practice for ministers and assistant ministers before the 30th of April 2025 to enable new practices to be implemented on the 30th of June 2025 to include the requirement for A, details of external meetings attended by ministers and assistant ministers regarding government matters to be published monthly in arrears on the government website, and B, details of all off-island travel by ministers and assistant ministers, including the costs incurred, to be published within 30 days of return to the island on the government website.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. During the previous debate, a motion was passed to move to the next item in order to allow me to amend the timeframes for setting a code of conduct. It was a pity, sir, that some chose to pitch this topic as a battle between the former and the current government, and it is a matter of some disappointment that the comments published on Friday by both the Council of Ministers and the PPC have continued in that tone. As parliamentarians, we are guided by the 7 Nolan principles. This proposition relates to several aspects of those principles: openness, transparency, accountability, and leadership. Values, sir, that are critical to building trust with our community. Now, let's not forget that the Jersey Opinion and Lifestyle Survey published in December found that this Assembly is the least trusted institution in the island, and that trust has declined significantly since the question was last put in 2022. The amendment I have proposed simply allows a greater level of flexibility following a suggestion by Deputy Balash, and it extended the time period for the Council of Ministers to agree its own code of conduct, because the ball is being placed in their court on this matter. They are simply being asked by the Assembly, if they support the proposition, to look to some of the many examples of similar systems that are operated in most jurisdictions, both small and large, and agree their own way of doing it. We are where we are, as they say, sir, and that will be a matter for the public at the ballot box. Had I been able to remain in office, this should have been achieved by now. I had discussed the topic with the relevant officer, and I'm sure that they were able to assist ministers in their consideration of this matter. Unlike the current government, I also made my best endeavours to communicate clearly about the meetings I held that were of interest to people by using social media channels that are available to us all. One of the strengths of our system is our accessibility, along with our ability as politicians to move around our community without too much concern for safety, unlike in other places. However, a lack of openness in this regard has left people to make their own assumptions about what goes on behind closed doors, hence the low levels of trust in this institution. To be absolutely clear, sir, this does mean lobbying, both formal and informal. At the last election, the people made it abundantly clear that they wanted to see an end to what is termed the Old Boys Club. This proposition helps to offer greater comfort to those members of our electorate who hold that view, simply by opening up a diary and communicating about what it contains. This is achieved in most jurisdictions without causing issue to people's privacy or that of a minister. It is a matter of regret, sir, that the PPC do not appear to share this view and instead have added complexity to the argument. Their role is to uphold standards, and I urge them to revisit the matter. This debate, however, is a partial victory, and I'm grateful that the government has committed to publishing travel expenses on a quarterly basis, which is a step in the right direction. We should all expect both the PPC and the Council of Ministers to uphold and champion the Nolan principles of openness and transparency, as they are important factors to maintain and to gain the public's trust. Having reflected upon this, sir, and having read the comments that were published on Friday, I do not wish to take up any more of the Assembly's time on this matter, and with some regret, I withdraw the amendment and the proposition. I apologise to those members who may have taken the time to kindly prepare once again for this debate, but I do not think that now is the time, and I hope that the PPC will take the matter in hand along with the Council of Ministers, and we will see some delivery of openness and transparency. Thanks.
So you are withdrawing in full the proposition at this stage. Well, as the debate is not opened, it's open to you to do so without the leave of the Assembly. Therefore, the proposition is accordingly withdrawn. We come now to modern languages in schools. P74, lodged by Deputy Tadier. The main respondent is the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Amendments have been added, or amendments have been put forward, but Deputy, I noticed there was an email that you forwarded to members, and perhaps you could explain which amendments, if any, you are accepting, and where we're left with amendments that need to be debated by the Assembly.
Thank you, sir. Just to clarify for those listening and anyone who didn't see the email, I've stated that I will be withdrawing my part C, so part C in the original proposition, which deals with the review into the delivery of Portuguese language tuition. So that will fall away, and of course any subsequent amendments that were made to that would also fall away. I'll be accepting the amendment to Part B, which I think is the addition of clarification of mainstream provided secondary schools, and I won't be accepting or supporting any of the other amendments.
Very well, so those other amendments will need to be put in due course after you've made the proposition. Greffier, would you read the proposition with the amendment that the Deputy is accepting under A, and without reading C, but the rest as drafted by the Deputy originally? Is that correct, Deputy?
That's right, sir. And if the minister's happy with the acceptance of Part B and doesn't want a separate debate on that.
Mr. Riley, content? Yes, the Minister is content with that. Very well. If members agree, we will read them and amended in that way, and we'll come to the amendments that are not agreed when they naturally arise. Thank you.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning to undertake any necessary actions to ensure A, that all students, both primary and secondary, should receive support from their school to access and develop their home language in accordance with the rights afforded by Article 30 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. B, that all mainstream provided secondary schools should continue to offer a choice of at least 2 modern languages other than English, one of which must be French. And D, that the requirement for students to study at least 1 modern language other than English should be extended from Key Stage 3, ages 11 to 13, to Key Stage 4, ages 14 to 16, from September 2026.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Because I've been caught slightly off guard, sir, could I ask if the usher could bring some water for me, just so that I don't dry up? And also, thank members for their attention and indulgence in advance. As I said, I was, not that it should make too much difference, I was hoping for maybe half an hour or so to be able to compose myself. But it is obviously a subject in which I've given a lot of thought, not just over the last year, but in fact, as the information I've circulated to members will indicate, also really over the last 15 years that I've been in this Assembly. And maybe let's start with that point. I know, sir, that I'm not the only member in the Assembly who cares passionately about language provision, both in schools, but also in the wider community, and in fact in this Assembly. I think it's really important to remember that Jersey has so many uniquenesses, and also when it comes to our own Assembly, that we might find ourselves in 2024 as an Anglophone Assembly to all intents and purposes, but we are also a Francophone Assembly in fact and officially, and also when we wish to use that. And we do, alongside our very valuable adhesion to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, also have that membership of the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie, which opens so many doors to us throughout not just Europe, but the rest of the world, and not just to French-speaking countries, but those who value French as a cultural or diplomatic or economic language, sir. Thank you. And also, we have to remember that English that we're speaking today, and I've got no intention, it might relieve some members of speaking French or Gerrier, although I'm allowed to do that, sir, if I wanted to. That we have a community which has always been informed by lots of different cultures and languages, and that actually English is the new kid on the block, so to speak, when it comes to modern languages. So I also have to apologise in advance if I'm going to not be politically correct, because I know that there will be potentially people listening outside, maybe academics, and I'm sure those in the education department, if I use terms that are outmoded, because I think nomenclature seems to change so quickly. So I might refer to things like foreign languages, which I think are probably not entirely PT. We should probably refer to them as additional languages or the such, because of course foreign is a relative term. You know, if you're speaking French here, it might be considered a foreign language. If you're in France, it's certainly not foreign. So I make those opening comments. And also recognise the fact that there have been other champions in this Assembly that are currently here. So I look over to Deputy Balash, who's been a strong proponent of multilingualism, multiculturalism, Deputy Joseph, of course. And I think of former members in this Assembly who, when I've been doing my research, have asked questions. Ones like the Constable Galichon, Juliette Galichon, and Constable Ken Vibert, both of whom were very competent linguists in their own right, but also passionate former president of the Assemblée Parlementaire themselves. And so I also want to put this in context, that this is not something that is new or directed at this particular education minister or department. This is something that questions have been asked about for a long time. And so if I refer members to the papers that I circulated over the lunch period, there was a question from 2019, essentially, which asks, would the minister consider the reintroduction of at least one modern foreign language as compulsory until GCSE as part of the standard curriculum in state schools? And if not, why not? And it also asked about what the resourcing might be for that. So there's been plenty of time for successive education departments to look at that. And the answer came back that the 2015 to 2019 business plan stated its aspiration for a modern language foreign language qualification to be part of every student's GCSE portfolio in the long term. And they went on to say that as the first step towards this aspiration, the department has supported the effective teaching of French in primary schools. We also find, sir, that more recently, in fact very recently, only this week, in answer to a question that I put about French in particular, that we see, I think, some very worrying statistics that basically if we look at the 4 non-fee paying state schools, 11 to 16 schools, that 85% of students in year 11 who finish those schools leave without a GCSE in French, which I don't know about anyone else, but I think that's a remarkable statistic, because if we go back only 20 years, it was a requirement really for most of those students, not all of them, because there will always be carve-outs, and I think we'll get onto that, but the vast majority would leave with a GCSE in a language, and that would more often than not be French. And how we get to a point whereby 85% of those students in ostensibly a French-speaking island, where French isn't officially still a language of our community, we can be in that state. I shows actually the trend that's happened in the last 20 years. And how did we get to this point? Well, it's quite interesting. We're going to hear arguments later on, I think, from the Minister about the fact that this needs to be referred to the Jersey Curriculum Council, because this is a change to the curriculum. I would actually contest that, and we'll deal with that when we come to the amendment, sir, by looking at the 1999 education law, that this is actually a political decision that was being made, but I think one that we've sleepwalked into. And it was a political decision that was made not by Jersey, but it was actually a directive that was given by the UK Secretary of State for Education back in 2003, 2004, where the UK policy, the English curriculum policy, was changed so that a second language was no longer required for Key Stage 4. And what happened is that over a period of time, Jersey schools simply adopted that position gradually. Some schools held out longer than others. I know that, I won't mention the schools, but some adopted it more quickly. And we've got to a point now that if you want to be guaranteed for your children to do a language for GCSE, whichever that is, you either have to send them to a fee-paying school, which is JCG, or a selective school, which is Holier, and there's still a requirement at the former to do French GCSE, and at the latter to do a GCSE of your choice. But for all other schools, including Victoria College, where that was a long-standing position, that French was required, that's fallen by the wayside. And of course, why does that matter? Well, first of all, it matters because we're not England, and we've, by default, somehow got ourselves into the position where we're following a policy which has, at its root, been dictated by a UK minister some 20 years ago. We've also been told that, as I said, this has to be referred to the Curriculum Council, but the original decision, I've asked in a recent written question about when this meeting took place to adopt this. The Curriculum Council in Jersey never met to endorse a policy which would see the requirement for GCSEs to be removed in the first place. And so, of course, there was no decision to pursue that particular avenue, sir. And I'll just refer now to the main part of other parts of my proposition. So essentially what we're looking at here, and I will talk to the contentious part of this proposition rather than necessarily what we all agree with, but there is first of all some common ground here. So the first part that I think we all agree on, and I think the Minister and I certainly stand shoulder to shoulder, is that all students, both primary and secondary, should receive support from their school to access and develop their home languages in accordance with their human rights and their rights as children. And I think that's key because, as I've said in my report, every language is an asset, every person needs to be respected, and every culture needs to be acknowledged. So what I'm essentially looking for in this wider proposition are three things. I'm asking us to recognise the fact that, first of all, the learning of one's native tongue, or home language as it should be called, is the first building block to learning more generally. I'm not sure if it's the case in this Assembly. There's certainly a few examples of members, esteemed members, valued members here who have English as an additional language, whose home language wasn't English. And I know that we're likely to hear from them during this debate. I welcome that, and I think their contributions will also be very valuable to us in that respect. The second point is that the learning of a second language, an additional language, has so many advantages and provides a further platform for learning. So this isn't just simply about languages which are discretely in one box. It's about actually how languages are a building block for lifelong learning, in fact. And I know that's another area which both I and the Minister are really keen on promoting, making sure that students, adults can go on to learn even long after they've left school. And here's the third critical point, which really speaks to the nub of Part D, which is where we're going to have the main debate today. It's that if you cease to study a language at the age of 14, that's far too young, certainly in my book, and I think we're in the book of most academics out there, and it's completely out of kilter with the rest of Europe. And this is what I would say, is that what I'm asking for today isn't, I'm not asking for the earth here. What I'm saying is, it's a fairly low bar. It's saying that until the age of 16, if you can, and there will be carve-outs, that you should do an additional language. That could be French, could be Spanish, it could be Italian, could be Portuguese, could be Polish, could be Romanian, whatever it is. You will do that in addition to English, which is a requirement of the curriculum. The bar is set so much higher in Europe that what we should be talking about, of course, is you should be doing 2 languages until you're 18, 2 additional languages. And if we look throughout Europe, I mean, somebody sent me a video which I thought was really useful over the weekend. In fact, they sent it to me before the weekend, and it was of a Finnish primary school class. I say they're primary school, they're about 10 years old. I think they're called 4th graders, so it must be an American slant to it. And they were having a normal lesson. They were actually being taught about fake news, really important subjects. And they were being taught about this in Spanish, and they were also being taught about this in English. So you've got this 10-year-old Finnish young lad who's actually talking to the camera about the importance of being able to distinguish fake news, and he's learning it in Spanish, and he's also talking about it in English. And of course, his native tongue will be Finnish, and it's really important for him and his fellow pupils because they're right on the border of Russia. And so these things are not mutually exclusive. When you learn another language, you learn so much more. You're learning about art, you're learning about history, you're learning about geography, you're learning about science and maths, because you have to learn how to count in another language, or you at least have to know what the numbers mean. But you don't have to learn everything again if you're learning another language. And I think we had these comments, and I thought what was a very good debate on the bilingual schools, very informed debate. It didn't win, of course, but I think a lot of the themes were supported in that, sir. Now, the question might come is, well, what do teachers think about this? What do head teachers think about it? Head teachers possibly don't want this, as the deputy engaged with schools on this. I'm quite happy to say that I couldn't get around to all schools, but I did make sure that I wrote to a number of schools, and I got invited to 2. So I went to see a school in which languages are required for GCSE, and I went to one school, a state school, which is where it isn't required. And I was impressed by both schools. They both had a commitment in different ways to languages. They both had different starting points. It's fair to say that in the school where it wasn't a requirement, the head teacher, although he was, I think, very much pro-languages, was pro-choice. He said he didn't want to oblige some of his students to have to do languages. We'll hear those arguments come forward. The head of languages, on the other hand, was much more open to the fact that he or she thought, cat's out of the bag, that actually it should be a requirement, and that, of course, when she was at school, like many of us, it was a requirement to at least carry on studying the language until the age of 16. And one of the teachers at the other school said something interesting, because one thing that might come up as a counter-argument here, and I'm trying to preempt some of those thoughts, is can you imagine teaching a class of students who don't want to do the subject? And he said, actually, it's not just about forcing children to do, say, French at the age of 15 when they might not want to be doing French. They might want to be playing football. But of course, we can make all of those arguments about maths, English, science, and English literature where they have to do them. He said, can you actually imagine teaching a class of 12-year-olds French when they know that actually the next year they're going to drop it? He says, we've got a problem in some schools between the ages of 11 and 12 and 13 where they're just not interested because they see that languages are just not important. Why do they think they're not important? Because we've effectively told them that. They can give them up as soon as they're able to, as soon as they turn into what used to be the 4th year 10, the end of year 9. You've got your options, and a language doesn't have to form part of them. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a holistic education in my book. We already know that we've got an issue following the English system where we've got a very narrow, we specify far too early for A-level, sir, and it means that we specialise at an age where most of our counterparts in Europe are actually receiving a much broader education. So I turn to the other statistic that's been put out, that actually there's no problem because 51% of students leave school with a GCSE in a foreign language. And if you turn to page 8 of the report, we'll actually see that, I don't know if I can say this, sir, but there are lies, there are damned lies, and there are statistics. It's a well-known expression. The key point here is that...
I'm not entirely sure it makes it parliamentary. There are lots of well-known expressions I wouldn't like to hear on the floor of the Assembly, Deputy, but I'll let it pass on this occasion.
Thank you, sir. When we actually look at the breakdown of that 51%, what we see is that the average, of course, being used here, and the Minister as a scientist likes to talk about averages. I know we're talking about the mean specifically, so it's not the mode or the median, it's the mean, which is the collective. So it's not a very useful statistic because it doesn't give us the breakdown per school. And what we see in that is actually that the results for JCG and Holia, where 91% of their students at JCG obviously do a modern language to 16, and at Holia, where 86% do a language to 16, that of course brings the mean up significantly. And if we take out that average and also take out Victoria College, which is a selective school, we can do both figures, the figure falls down to 36%. So again, it's the majority of students in the state's non-fee-paying schools, 36% of them do one kind of language, So that means the majority, 65%, leave school again without even a modern language, let alone French. And I think again that's a worrying statistic because we know that languages are really important not just for the community but also I think for the economy. So if we turn to the second extract that I've put on that circular, 2013, so we're going back a few years now. We're going back 11, 12 years almost. Will the minister, which minister was it? How many have we got through since 2013? I think this was probably Deputy Patrick Ryan, if I remember rightly. Will the minister state which foreign languages are the most important for Jersey, both currently and in the medium term, and what plans there are for the coordination with the Minister for Education, Sport and Culture to make sure that there are a sufficient number of local school leavers who are sufficiently competent to use these languages to meet current and future demands for these language skills. So probably that question is going to the Economic Development Minister. How are you going to liaise with the Education Minister? And the answer came back that individuals who study languages at a higher level in Jersey have remained relatively and consistently low over the last 5 years, with a slight dip in 2013 and 2014. Enhanced language skills are likely to become a key employability asset in terms of the future for the Jersey workforce and the states, which is seeking to promote languages alongside a higher level professional skills. So I'm going to draw this part to a close because I think, I could certainly baffle myself, if not others, with statistics. And I've seen the trends that by analysing the statistics from the department. And I do thank the Minister and his staff because I know that he's been giving me a lot of statistical information. He's not the only one. I've pointed that out before. I've asked all education ministers in the past these kind of questions. I think I want to set out the vision that I have for where Jersey needs to be, because what we do is that we reap the things that we sow, not immediately, but sometimes it's a question of 10, 15, 20 years into the future. I was asked in a different context this week for what my thoughts were from a scrutiny panel perspective about the low birth rates. And of course, you have to think that the consequences of that are going to be, of course, some things are short term. There's going to be an impact on the education system, but the real impact is going to be in 20, 30, 40 years' time when those people who are not being born now, if we like, are not going to be able to take part in the Jersey community or the Jersey economy and contribute to that. And so we have to think the same about the changes that are taking place in our education system. And I would make the point that those changes that were made in another place in the UK, the policy changes that have then filtered down into the Jersey education system, are starting to have that effect now. We're starting to see fewer linguists, or not even linguists, but people leaving school with the basic components that they have, the basic skills that languages give, not just the languages themselves, finding themselves in this brave new world today. And I also take into account that the UK may have wished to vote for Brexit if it wanted to. Jersey never had that desire or that ability to vote for Brexit. And in fact, I think Jersey positions itself best when it's an outward-looking island, when it recognises the fact that we're part of the European as well as the British family and British community. We're also part of that European community. That when we look across Gorey over to the east, it's not Dorset or Hampshire that we see, it's the Cotentin Peninsula. It's where our French cousins live, our Norman cousins. And if we go south, we get to Brittany, where we have our Breton cousins and our European neighbours that are amongst us. And we're long losing the ability to speak with them in their own language, but also in their own political language, I fear. And so that's why I think it's important that we set out a vision to say that actually this is a decision for the states. It is right that actually the states opines in principle on what should be in the Jersey curriculum, because we're not talking about an English curriculum here. And that certainly when it comes to the state schools, there's a reason that they're called state schools. It's because they are state schools and we are the state. So it's right that we do have some kind of interaction in terms of what we would like to see in the curriculum. I think it's important to say, sir, that we are Jersey, and I think that it's important that we have a Jersey curriculum which is holistic, which is fit for the future, which is outward looking, and yes, it does accept the fact that we have multiple cultures here, but it's a specific Jersey identity that we need to be promoting. And so I would sum up by saying, and looking, I would like to look behind me and look around, in fact, and say, you know, it's a tough ask, this one, because we know that the ministerial whip's going to be out again, presumably. I've already had members telling me, I'd like to support this, but, you know, collective responsibility and all that. And I say, well, actually, I don't think that's the case. I think there are examples where you vote with your conscience on this. And I would much prefer for members not to vote for an amendment which actually maybe kicks this into the long grass. If you don't like the proposition, by all means vote against it, but don't be tempted to vote for an amendment which actually could get us to a position where we end up doing nothing when we could be doing something really positive for the island into the future. And I make the proposition, sir.
Is the proposition seconded? Yes. There are amendments to the proposition, and some of those amendments have not been accepted by Deputy Tadier, and therefore those need to be debated now. So I'd ask the greffier to read the...
So may I raise a point of order, yes, if I may? So the Deputy, in advancing this proposition, spoke about a ministerial whip. And I am genuinely asking, sir, that we've been through a budget where, and I offer no criticism, it is a genuine question for you maybe not to opine on now, but are we entitled as members to know whether there is a ministerial whip or not? Because otherwise there's no point in having a debate. And I just think that this Assembly doesn't know we're having a debate, but if there's a ministerial whip, there's a majority, and we lose it.
I have to say I haven't given that the slightest thought, and I would need
May I
to
ask
think
you,
very carefully as to whether or not there was any obligation, but my first instinctive reaction is that how the Council of Ministers organise themselves is a matter for the Council of Ministers. If ministers wish to say that there's some kind of discipline that's been opposed for a particular proposition, that's a matter for them, but I don't think I can insist or require. That would be my first reaction.
I'm grateful, sir. It's just that I don't want to waste this Assembly's time, because otherwise we are really literally wasting our time.
On that extremely narrow point, if you wish to say something, Chief Minister, no, very well. I'd ask the greffier.
I mean, I'm not quite sure I understand the Deputy's objection. It's called democracy. What we exercise in this chamber, sir. Council of Ministers discuss and make decisions by consensus. We do not have collective responsibility enshrined in, and so quite often we discuss it, and ministers and assistant ministers, if they're not going to support a minister, they say so and make their case for it. And it's called democracy, sir, and that's what we abide to in the Council of Ministers. And I think in this Assembly, sir, arguments are won or lost on their merits.
Well, I think, thank you, Chief Minister. I've allowed that exchange to take place because clearly it was a matter of exercising the Deputy, but I think now we move on within accordance with the strict rules of debate within the Assembly, and I ask the greffier to read the amendments to the proposition.
Page 2, paragraph D. After the word that, insert the words, a review and consultation is undertaken by the Jersey Curriculum Council for, and for the words from September 2026, substitute the words, and to report back to the Minister before the end of December 2025. Page 2, paragraph D. After paragraph D, insert the following new paragraph E. That the reviews and consultations undertaken by the Jersey Curriculum Council include assessment and costings of any staff and non-staff resource requirements and any effects on option choices in schools.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. It's nice to get to the debate at last. So thank you. This amendment places the Deputy's proposition onto a platform whereby his interest in promoting modern languages is supported in a positive and realistic way. I want the Assembly to understand the range of need and the changing environment of modern education, and why the changes proposed in the initial proposition need to be addressed in a more detailed and relevant way. I do have concerns about the Assembly making direct decisions on the curriculum content.
Sorry to interrupt the Minister, but would you mind speaking up, please?
Yes. I've never been asked that before in my life, sir.
Well, nonetheless, If you're able to speak up, Minister, I'm sure
I
that
am
will be
certainly
most
able
welcome.
to speak up, sir. Ironically, sir, I was told before I speak too loudly, but I thank you. I say thank you to the deputy for that. I've obviously softened in my old age. So I will start again if that's okay. That's a very teacher thing to do. So this amendment places the deputy's proposition onto a platform whereby his interest in promoting modern languages is supported in a positive and realistic way. I want the Assembly to understand the range of need and the changing environment of modern education and why the changes proposed in the initial proposition need to be addressed in a more detailed and relevant way. I do have concerns about the Assembly making direct decisions on the curriculum content and in doing so circumventing the dedicated professionals who know our schools and the challenges faced every day. And I want to allow the forum that exists, the Curriculum Council, to be enabled to consider this proposed change in consultation with those directly involved. So this is an opportunity to look at the current context of language teaching, to look at the historic changes that have occurred, and to develop a best opportunity to develop this one area of the curriculum. This is what the Curriculum Council does across our curriculum, and indeed it is what those who deliver subjects would wish to do in sharing good practice. Furthermore, the Jersey Curriculum Council is a statutory body within the Education Law 1999, defined under Article 19. Subsequently, to make a major change to the curriculum across our schools, I am duty-bound to consult. I know that the proposer has an issue as to why this did not happen when the previous changes occurred. Languages have never been compulsory in the way the deputy is suggesting. It was the choice of the school. As the curriculum, children's needs and needs of our society and economy have changed, so has the choice as to whether languages courses will be universal in school to 16. Schools have adapted to change and offer a huge range of choice to best meet the needs of the children they teach within a very selective education system. The proposition, unamended, would make a blanket change to provision that means the Curriculum Council must be consulted. All I can say is I am not responsible for the approaches from the previous ministers mentioned from many years ago, but I will ensure decisions will be made correctly under my leadership. So how does this amendment do this? I will go through each paragraph carefully. I will do so as quickly as possible to members to give you a bit of relief there. Part A is not an issue in terms of accepting the wording. It will raise the context of the challenge our schools faced, where 84 languages are spoken. The ongoing work to give and develop the support needed is happening. Is it perfect? The answer is no, but the work continues. Part B, now accepted by the deputy, and this corrects a serious error in the original proposition. It makes a very simple but important change to Part B, and we must identify that this applies to mainstream schools. Our schools that provide incredible support to children who need the most cannot be told to deliver something that is simply unrealistic. I also highlight, sir, the role of the additional resource centres in schools that address specific needs of students who cannot access the full curriculum. And they are based in our 11 to 16 schools. This is an important, vital cohort of children that we cannot fail. And so this is an example of the challenges the whole of the education system face. One size does not fit all. Mainstream schools do currently offer a choice of languages, and they do so in a difficult environment for recruitment and retention, and with many challenges for what provision needs to satisfy the demands of parents and children. We must remember that not all children will cope with a diet of 8 or 9 GCSE courses. Their needs must be met. So Part C is now removed, but so I would like to highlight at this point the excellent support given to our schools by the Portuguese government via the Camões agreement. Not too bad. So the investment that has happened there was superb. So I agreed with the Deputy's initial call for a review. This amendment positioned it in the correct place and with the realistic timetable. And it's a shame that actually we haven't retained this part and it just accepted because the Deputy wanted to review and now doesn't seem to want to review in that area, but that's okay, we can move forward. So Part D is the really important part of this amendment. The original proposition simply imposes the compulsory teaching of modern languages to GCSE to all students from September. And I repeat, all students. It does so without any consideration of the views of students, schools, or the wider community. And I refer members back to the reference to the additional resource centres in our 11 to 16 schools, which cater for children who cannot cope with a full GCSE load. It would include those children in the compulsory provision of French or a modern language. It does so with no consideration of the staffing and financial requirement to make this imposition. I remind members that language at GCSE are an option and there is a significant uptake. And in 2024, in a cohort of 877 Year 11 students, not including De La Salle and Bolia, because we don't have their figures, are slightly different, 451 took one or more languages, a percentage of 51%. And that 51% is important and valid, because it's the whole cohort, and that's what we're talking about here. Of course, our 11-16 schools rates would be lower. They are a selective set of schools. And the cohort in our 11-16 schools need to be supported in a slightly different way at GCSE. A member of the Assembly did suggest to me that students are not able to follow a language anymore. That is simply not the case. The options are available for all students should they wish to take that option. Further, and most importantly from an education perspective, it takes no consideration of the impact of removing an option from schools and from children. And to suggest, sir, that we can simply add another compulsory subject to the curriculum with no impact is wrong. It is fundamentally incorrect. Without extending the school day, or doing something radically different, which is going to be almost impossible and make it more challenging for children. I offer to all members a meeting with any head teacher or member of staff producing timetables to see the reality of the demand this will make. Before you make those decisions, think that through. And we must understand the impact of teaching of other subjects, which now may be unviable as a group due to small numbers after an option is removed. There are options that happen in schools with just about the right number to maintain a class. If one of the option blocks is removed by adding a compulsory subject, those subjects are at risk. That is the reality of schools. And this is what we must consider if we are not about to do more damage to our provision than good. The amendment promotes this work via the Curriculum Council in order that the genuine impact of change is understood. This then enables me to make meaningful and successful change where necessary. If the change is as easy as the Deputy suggests, then the recommendation should be actionable, but in a way that is sustainable and educationally valid. Making a change that is not sustainable over the long term is damaging for children. So Part E is equally as important. The additional paragraph is vital, and it says that the consultations undertaken by the JCC, if I may call it the JCC, the Jersey Curriculum Council, include assessment and costings of any staff and non-staff resource implementation requirements and any effect on option choices. Removing an option block will mean some subjects may become untenable in terms of numbers. The knock-on may be to lose staff who no longer teach a subject at GCSE. This impact must be understood, planned for and addressed before a change is made. The original proposition makes absolutely no reference to this possibility. So, some concluding points. And there is a point I would like to raise. In previous debates, we have had members of this Assembly openly criticise the delivery of languages in schools. So I want to state that I see this as unfair. I offer an open invite to any member who has a concern to meet with teachers, language teachers, go into schools to look at what is happening in classrooms across our island, across all of our schools, our selective and our non-selective schools. The reality of the commitment made to deliver a subject of foreign language and the challenges faced will be real to you then. And many students follow one or indeed more languages at GCSE. It's their choice to do so. This choice remains. So the choices created by schools to engage students, increase opportunity and provide experience for a modern world must be recognised. In the report, sir, there are links to all the options choices offered in our schools. Please click on those links. Look at the range of choice that is being provided for schools to meet the needs of a modern society for children now. The data from 15 years ago or 13 years ago needs to be taken with the context of the change over the last 12 and 13 years for the needs of our society and the needs of our children. Schools are trying to do that with some remarkably unique ways to address that. So schools also include all abilities in this provision. Some students may have one option at GCSE to support them, to enable them to genuinely access the curriculum and support real success, i.e. their option is not a GCSE but a support option. That is very real in our non-selective schools. We must remember that. Forcing these students into a different and relatively academic subject must be considered very carefully. One concern raised with me over the possible change from an educational professional is this. If you have low literacy and cannot access English GCSE, then it is highly unlikely you will be able to access a language. It is also not inclusive practice, and I know minister after minister have talked about the importance of inclusion. It is not inclusive practice, sorry, that was a little sub-bit there. It is not inclusive practice when assessing curriculum choices at GCSE. But so I finish on a positive note. This amendment starts a dialogue with the body set up in law to look at our curriculum, with those who deliver the curriculum, with head teachers, parents, the wider community, and most importantly, the young people who will follow the curriculum we are looking to impose. Any outcomes can then be acted on in a meaningful timescale and for those right reasons, and very crucially, in a sustainable way. Education is a balancer, a balance between the many demanding voices who have views on what our system should contain, a balance between the demands of a modern society and the young people for who we want to provide the best experience, the most relevant experience, and the most suitable qualifications, and the balance between the reality of what we deliver for our children and how it is delivered. So I want to thank the education staff for the work they do, and I ask the Assembly to respect their professionalism, respect the statutory functions of the Jersey Curriculum Council, and support this amendment. So I move the amendment. Thank you.
Very much. Is the amendment seconded? Deputy Taddeo.
Thanks. So I thought I'd speak early on this just to set out the stall as to why I think the original unamended version is better than the amended version, and ultimately that's of course what we're talking about here before we move on to the main debate on the merits of the underlying proposition, I hope. And in order to do that, I refer us back to what the unamended paragraph would look like if the amendment isn't adopted, which I hope it isn't. So what I'm asking very simply in paragraph D is that the requirement for students to study at least one modern language other than English should be extended from Key Stage 3, i.e. 11 to 13, to Key Stage 4, which is 14 to 16 years old, from September 2026. It doesn't mention anything about a GCSE. It doesn't mention anything about all students. What it simply says is it acknowledges the fact that it is already a pre-existing requirement in law for students right from primary school, I think it's age 7 to 13, to study a modern language, and that modern language has to be French. The UK has a slightly different position. England has a position where students also have to study a language from 11 to 13, but it can be a choice of languages. That's the only difference that we have here. It's entirely possible, therefore, and that's basically the position that I'm asking for, is to go back to what used to be commonplace in schools before the changes happened. And I'll address some of the points that the ministers made to suggest why schools should be best placed to make that choice. Now, what the minister is asking for, if we adopt his amendment, would read that a review and consultation is undertaken by the Jersey Curriculum Council for the requirement for students to study at least one modern languages, as I've outlined, and then to report back to the minister before the end of December 2025. Now, I think there's a few issues here. The first is that I'm asking for an opinion, an in-principle decision from my colleagues in the Assembly on this issue. What the minister is asking for is a review and a consultation to be undertaken. Who is it going to be undertaken by? The Jersey Curriculum Council. Now, the first thing is that how often have we heard governments being criticised, either now or in the past, for not wanting to take action, but actually just to engage in reviews and consultations? And the second point is that we already know what the outcome of the review of the Jersey Curriculum Council will be, because the minister's basically outlined the multitude of hurdles that there are to making this a reality. Ultimately, it can't be delivered because the starting point is, and I respect this, it's a difference of opinion between the minister, myself and the department. So I did make sure that I went to speak to the department months ago. In fact, it was at the same time when Deputy Balash was moving his proposal, and it was quite clear that the department don't want to do this. They've got their policy, which is quite clear that they value students' choice, and that schools should choose whether or not languages are taken, either whether they're offered as a compulsory subject or an option, and then students decide whether that option is implemented. And that's fine, that's just a political difference of opinion. But when we start getting into the language of that this would be damaging for our children in the schools, my mind moves to Europe and thinks of all those poor damaged children that are coming out of the education system, not just at the age of 16, but at the age of 18, because they're being forced to study not just one foreign language, but 2 foreign languages, and they've got irreparable damage that they have to have years of counselling for. And it's just complete shroud waving. It's alarmism, and it doesn't bear the reality. The point here is that we have a highly divisive and selective education system, which is what the minister and I agree on. And the consequences are that the students who end up in the 11 to 16, I say end up there, it's a perfectly good place to be. But if you're in the 11 to 16 fee-paying school system, non-fee-paying school system, there's a presumption that you will leave school statistically without a GCSE in a foreign language. And so what do? If you're a parent who cares about languages and wants your child to have a holistic education, because personally I think a lot of parents think it should be obligatory, not just to 16 but to 18. And it used to be the case in Jersey that you'd want to at least keep your options open until you went to university or until you went on to a vocational profession, whatever it was. Because of course a language can be useful for both a lawyer, a doctor and an electrician. Because there are opportunities both here and abroad, and there is studying that can be done in any particular area, sir. So first of all, I think don't be tempted to vote for this as a middle route to say that actually I support languages, but let's refer it to the Curriculum Council because they know best. Because first of all, who are the Curriculum Council? I'm trying to find that out, but it's set out in law. There's a chair who I think is the chief executive of the education and life, that department, and there's a vice chair who's appointed by the minister, I think, and there's 13 other professional teachers, none of whom, to my knowledge, are language teachers. And they will simply come back and say, don't do this because it's not, we don't think it's a good idea. And so don't go down that rabbit hole. It would be, I think, unproductive to do that. Simply vote against it if you don't want it to happen. But if you do want it to happen, I think then let's go back to the point that this is an in-principle debate. And if the states turn around, if we turn around and say, look, we think we agree that it should be a requirement for this to be studied up until the ages of 16, then the minister will go back to the law, which Article 16 of the 1999 Education Law says. The minister shall, after consultation with the Jersey Curriculum Council, Part B, revise that curriculum whenever the minister considers it necessary or expedient to do so. So the minister has got the power, this minister or any minister, has got the power to make changes to the curriculum when he wants to. You'd presume that the minister wants to know what the States Assembly thinks, because the States Assembly also is a consultative body. And if the States Assembly says to the minister, we think that this should be put back into the curriculum, and we're going to hear those arguments hopefully in the main debate, which will say, yes, no, this is what I think, this is what it was like when I was at school, these are the considerations for me in whichever parish, and these are my business considerations for the business community, for the wider community as to why it might be a good thing. The minister will then take that decision back to the Curriculum Council, and he'll simply say the states has made this decision that they want to see languages back in the curriculum at Key Stage 4. How are we going to deliver that, guys? And that will be the consultation that he's required to do under the law. He will consult with the Curriculum Council, and then he'll revise that curriculum whenever the minister considers it necessary or expedient to do so. And he can do that in any way he wants. He can do it by coming back to the Assembly and saying, look, we're going to need to deliver it in this way. We're going to need potentially some more resources. But it's within both the gift of the minister to do that, and it's within the realms of reality to do that. It's something that we've done in the past anyway. It's something which schools are equipped to do, because in those schools where languages are optional, all students could turn around in any 1 year and say, we want to do languages. You could have 100% of a year group saying, we want to study French. How does the school then cope with that? They don't cope with it because they've got into a routine where actually there are options put out there, and there's a presumption that actually fewer and fewer students are doing languages in the first place. So I think let's keep this simple. Let's not ask for another review or a consultation. Let's not refer a review and a consultation to a body that we know that they're going to give an answer. I say this slightly tongue-in-cheek, but it's a little bit like if we wanted to make a decision, sir, with due respect about the future role of the president of this assembly, but we don't want to make a decision about it, so let's refer it to a body, let's refer it to the Comité de Connotables to see what they think about it, and ask the committee to say, what do you think about that? Or to refer electoral reform to them. And the question is, should we get rid of the constables? Should they no longer sit in the assembly? Let's ask the Committee de Connotables what they think. And the answer would come back, not sure about that. Not the best example, sir, and I probably shouldn't mix my metaphors, but how many members of the Curriculum Council does it take to change a light bulb? None, because there's nothing wrong with the light bulb, is the answer. So essentially, let's not move away from the main argument that we're looking at here. We have schools which are already set up to teach a multitude of languages up to the age of 16. That's currently not happening in certain schools. We don't need a review to determine whether or not this is the right thing to do. We need actually this assembly to give a steer to the minister about the direction we wish this to travel in, and that needs to be a clear steer which is unamended and not going down the route of a review which is both unnecessary and which will be a fait accompli, sir. So I do ask members to vote against the amendment.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on the amendment, Conataba St Martin.
So I'll rise to speak now. I'm only going to speak once, and I'm actually speaking on the main proposition, but I take it that if the amendment goes through, then the proposition would fall away, would it? Or...
No.
No, sorry.
The proposition would stand as amended.
Oh, yes, of course it would. Sorry, I'm having
So do you still
I'm
want to
having a
speak?
senior moment. I'll carry on speaking anyway. Yes, sorry. Sorry. Unfortunately, I'm not a natural linguist. However, I'm extremely grateful that I studied French up to GCSE, or O-level as it was known that long ago. Even now, when I can, I go off and take French lessons. Both my children took French to GCSE, and both have been fortunate to study abroad. My daughter in Montreal and my son in Amsterdam. Montreal is a wonderful official bilingual city, and Amsterdam, as we all know, is a fantastic European city with a multitude of languages. So many of their friends are not only bilingual, but are trilingual or multilingual and think nothing of it. Speaking another language is really enriching. France, for example, takes language speaking seriously. Children around the world who have access to languages from an early age and carry on till they leave school take it as a natural part of life. And they are not brighter or universally gifted at language, but it is the mindset of their country which is so different to the UK and Jersey. Why can we not follow suit here? It should be natural to learn another language because Jersey's history and culture is fundamentally multilingual, and our outlook has been international for centuries. One of the greatest successes of the last assemblies has been the increased support and recognition of the island's linguistic diversity and culture. It is vital that we continue down this path by supporting this proposition, and I mean the whole proposition. As Deputy Tadiers mentions in his report, language education in the UK faces a continued decline. It is our duty as elected representatives of this island to ensure that it is not mirrored in Jersey and that young islanders have the skills and advantages they need to succeed in life. It is only right that this includes multilingualism because speaking another language is something that the whole island benefits from, not just the individual. I'd ask members to vote against the amendments and veuillez voter pour la proposition du député Tadier. Merci. Please vote for Deputy Tadier's proposition.
Conor Harbison, please.
Thank you, sir, and I'm speaking on the amendment. As Assistant Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning, I fully support the amendment lodged by the Minister. I have no doubt of the passion for languages and well-meaning intentions of the proposer. However, I cannot help but see some issues it may cause if passed unamended. The Deputy had proposed a review into the delivery of the Portuguese language tuition in schools before he removed that from this debate. However, at the same time, he thinks we do not need any review or research or evidence or identification of additional resources before we commit to mandatory language study in Key Stage 4 from September next year. My concern is with the word mandatory. There are some children and young people who are not linguists and making something mandatory is not particularly good for them. I see the Minister's amendment as a positive one that supports paragraph A and makes one small but important change to paragraph B, which Deputy Tadier has accepted. Part C has been removed. Part D is left unamended, which means taking a blind leap of faith to implement mandatory language study for all Key Stage 4 students from September 2026. No speaking to students and teachers beforehand, no gathering of views from any parents, no assessment whatsoever into any additional resources that might be required, and no assessment of how this could impact on subject choices for students. So I'm not willing to take that blind leap of faith in this way, and I would urge other members to show similar restraint and support the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Conor Harbison.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'm grateful for Deputy Tadier to bring this proposition forward. And in speaking to the amendment at this point, I tend to agree with him that the direction of the Jersey Curriculum Council needs perhaps some alteration. He's quite right in saying that they don't seem to have the understanding of what's required in this day and age, and have become totally anglicised in their approach. And I would urge them to turn direction a bit to accommodate languages in a better way. I appreciate, sir, and it's been demonstrated by the performance given out in the answer to written question 26 by the department, that the performance of the achievement performance by schools has been rather poor. But I am grateful, sir, that Lekenve School in my own parish seems to be way ahead at 20% than the others. So congratulations to them and their teaching staff for doing that. So I think that the department needs to move on this. We can't stay in the languish in the past performance of the last 5 years. We have to move ahead and do better. And by following Deputy Tadier's example and rejecting this proposition is the way to go forward. Thank you, sir.
Right. Deputy Balash.
So the Minister's amendments are a fairly blatant attempt to kick Deputy Tadier's proposition into the long grass. The Curriculum Council, according to a written answer from his predecessor a few years ago, meets only 3 times a year, once every term. I'm sure it's a very useful body, but to suggest that these important issues around languages and multilingualism in our island should be referred to a council which works at a relatively leisurely pace, so that they report to the minister, not even to the states, just before the assembly goes into purdah, is a polite way of telling Deputy Tadier to get lost. And I don't think, sir, that is the message that the deputy should receive. He has fastened on to 2 really important points, one of which has been withdrawn, to my regret, actually, from the Assembly, insofar as it concerns the teaching of Portuguese. But I just want to say a few words about that, and I think it's relevant, sir, because paragraph D refers to the requirement to study at least one modern language. The teaching of Portuguese in our secondary schools, so that those of a Portuguese heritage can take advantage of their inherited ability to speak the language, to get an A star in their GCSEs or whatever is the highest mark now achievable, is a really important matter. I don't need to persuade members of the importance of this community. In 1998, more than a quarter of a century ago, I had the privilege of signing a Jersey-Madeira friendship agreement with President Alberto Jardim. The headline in the paper at the time was Amizade, friendship or partnership. And the JEP gave its Saturday interview to the president, during which he spoke warmly of Jersey, of integrating Portuguese people into our community, and of the importance of education in that process. But today, today we do have an opportunity, I think, of honouring our obligation under that agreement by taking a small but positive step forward. Amizade, that is what friendship means. The second important point made by Deputy Tadier relates to the taking of French, or indeed another modern language, at GCSE. He wants to turn the clock back 10 years when the UK took a retrograde step and Jersey foolishly followed suit. The Minister is halfway towards accepting this proposal because he agrees, it seems, that all mainstream secondary schools should teach French. But he wants to have a consultation as to the requirement to extend the requirement to take a foreign language to Key Stage 4 or to GCSE, and a report back which will, as I have suggested, in effect mean that nothing happens by September 2026. What is the purpose of consulting the Curriculum Council on this issue? A few head teachers may be in favour, many may be against. But the important issue is it a question for head teachers or the Curriculum Council to determine? If one wants a change in the law of assisted dying, does the medical profession have a veto on that? It's a policy matter for the Assembly to decide. One doesn't always ask lawyers as to whether a change in the law is desirable. Policy matters, such as the level of importance to attach to the teaching of French in our schools, are matters for elected representatives. The Minister said that adding another compulsory subject to the curriculum is wrong. And the Assistant Minister of Education said much the same thing. He said it was wrong to make it mandatory for students to study a language. But some subjects are already mandatory. We compel students to study those subjects. So it's a question of how important to the Assembly is the teaching of French in our schools. I can understand that some members may think that a knowledge of French is unimportant and that anyway most foreigners speak English and probably should do anyway. English is the only important language to master after all. But I believe that most members, indeed all those, whether born here or not, who have Jersey in their hearts, understand that the French language is part of Jersey's history and culture. The letters on the voting buttons in front of us stand for French words. We vote on projet de loi, draft laws. Prayers are in French. Some laws are in French. Gradually, but sadly inexorably, we are losing this part of our culture. And if we do not insist that our children learn French, it will soon all be gone. Some members may not care, but a majority of members that I have spoken to do care. They subscribe to the view that our linguistic heritage is in danger. So why does the Minister, who is one of that majority, as a matter of fact, insist on procrastinating and making it more likely that our rich multilingual history is obliterated? It's too easy, sir, to be swamped by problems, to be cowed by naysayers, and to find reasons for delaying and not grasping nettles that need to be grasped. We have already rejected the proposal for bilingual primary schools. Are we going to kick this proposition of Deputy Tadier also into the long grass? We should have the courage, as a matter of policy, to declare that teaching the foreign languages in Jersey is important, and that our identity is too special to ignore. I do hope, sir, that members will reject the Minister's amendment.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Balash asked several times in his remarks just now what the purpose of the Minister's amendment is, and I can tell him very succinctly what the purpose is. The purpose is to make sure that if we're going in this direction, we do it properly, that we understand that the provision of an education curriculum to our young people is not something you pluck out of thin air. It's not something you presume you make one decision and everything magically works beyond there. It's something that has to be carefully and considerately crafted to make sure that it is of the quality and the breadth that our young people need, so that every one of those young people in our schools, with no young person being left behind, is given a quality of service that enables them to thrive. And you don't achieve that by voting for one proposition and assuming everything magically falls into place after. You need to work with schools, you need to work with teachers, you need to work with those who will deliver this curriculum to say, right, how do we achieve this properly? How do we make sure that the breadth of options are there for young people? Do there need to be carves out, and what may those look like if they have to be applied? So this may be a parliamentary debating chamber where we will debate matters of ideology, and will do so democratically and often ferociously, but I think that how education is delivered to our children should be a no-go area for ideological debates. It should be about how do we practically deliver the best quality education to our young people. And I have to say, I've heard some disparagement or some cynicism at the very least of the Jersey Curriculum Council that seems to have come out of absolute nowhere to me. I don't have any reasons whatsoever to regard the Curriculum Council in the way that some members have hinted we ought to. I don't have any cynicism about their approach to this, and I cannot see a reason why, if it's not said to them that having had a constructive debate in this chamber, the Assembly is interested in expanding language provision in schools to make sure young people get the best options available to them there, why they wouldn't give that a good go and seriously look at it and then come back to the Minister and say, if you want to go in this direction, these are the things you'll have to consider in order to do that. What the Minister said about the time in the school day is a serious point here, because if you are all of a sudden saying to students that now this subject is compulsory, that will necessarily mean that for some children, they won't be doing something that they otherwise would have been doing. What might that be? What subjects might there need to be less provision for in future if language is promoted? These are all completely legitimate non-ideological questions. And the way we want to go about answering that question is to say, right, what is most practical? How do we do it? And what is in the best interest of those children to make sure that they've got those options before them. There was some talk about the history of language provision in schools in Jersey. So I had to do, it was compulsory for me to do a GCSE in a modern language when I was at Holyer, because Holyer was a school where that was a requirement at the time. And in the run-up to it, we were offered several weeks of tuition in a foreign language that we hadn't studied at that point in order to inform us what language we would want to choose. I'd studied French up until that point, but I was offered 2 weeks of Spanish and 2 weeks of Italian. And I remember at the time thinking that Spanish, I wasn't as keen on it as French, but I picked up what we were taught with not too much difficulty. And I found my experience of Italian to be the complete opposite. I didn't understand it. I wasn't able to put things together in my head and then verbalise them. The progress I had made in that 2 weeks was absolutely nothing compared to what I'd had in my 2 weeks of Spanish. But, sir, that shows, sir, that not every person or every child has the same aptitude at each subject as any other subjects, which is why options are so important, and making sure that you don't inadvertently provide options in a school that deprive a child of an opportunity to study something which they would thrive at because you've made a decision on the back of not adequate research and consultation to get there. And so in those discussions about the history of language provision in schools in Jersey, I thought of the old saying, those who don't learn the lessons of history are damned to repeat it, which of course that's an argument for making history GCSE compulsory, is it not? There are some children who would thrive at that, and every child is unique. Some are more arty and creative, some are better at practical things, some are better at academic things. And what do we do if we find situations where there is a child who, or children in a school, who it is so obvious that it is not a subject they're going to thrive at, that you will be wasting hours of their week and not allowing them to do another subject that they could thrive at, could get a good grade, that would look better on their CV, and that would enable them to do the things that they want to do afterwards. There was some debate in the last couple of years in the UK when the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had talked about making maths teaching compulsory to the age of 18. And when that as a proposal was made, because you could argue maths is such an important core subject, why should it not be compulsory up to the age of 18? But I remember a very powerful argument being made by the famous actor Simon Pegg. I'm very fond of the actor Simon Pegg because he has a very close likeness to my good friend Deputy Coles. They look very similar. Sorry, but it's just true. They do. And he made, he is an extremely successful actor and done a brilliant job in his career, arguing passionately, saying that if he'd have been forced to have done maths up until the age of 18, he would have absolutely hated it because it just wasn't something he enjoyed and had aptitude at, and it would have deprived him of time that he was spending working on the things that would actually get him further on in life. So that's not to say that we shouldn't have greater language provision in schools. We live in an interconnected world, and it's never been so easy to converse with people on the other side of the planet now, and it's really important that we have as much skills of communication as we have in whatever language, including English, and our ability to communicate there in that language, and making sure that the right level of provision is available, that it's dealt with properly, that there is a breadth of options across schools, because what if you had one school that simply didn't have the staffing power to deliver one particular language, but the school down the road has the ability to deliver a different language on offer as well. Your postcode would be determining what language you'd get to do. And if you're a child that has an aptitude at one language but not another, then it's your postcode that determines what your CV looks like with the GCSE that you get after it. So that is, I think, the real simple reason why the amendment made by the Minister is sensible, because it helps us determine how to do this properly. So as a backbencher and even as a Minister, I've been subjected many times to wrecking amendments from others seeking to prevent me from doing what I wanted to do. I would recognise them from a mile off, and this ain't one. And I think the cynicism that's been subjected to it is utterly ridiculous. The fact is that the Minister is absolutely open to looking at this and seeing how we can enhance that, but he's not prepared to just agree to it like that with no indication of what follows next, what resources it requires, what jiggling around of timetables in schools, or what staffing requirements that may be. All of that are non-ideological, technical questions that the Minister has said, great, let's have that discussion, let's look at what we can do, and then we can move forward with the next steps when it gets to it, but we do it properly. Doing it properly, I think, is the way forward, and that's why I'd urge members to support the amendment.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I first want to thank Deputy Mezek. If I'm Simon Pegg, I must make him Nick Frost, and I'll buy you a cornetto later. So, as I get this feeling as I'm listening to this debate of square pegs and round holes. we're trying to squeeze education onto children that they might not be adapt to learning. And when we look through and we talk about our options at GCSEs, and whether we could have changed the syllabus and change the curriculum about what we would like to study. Personally, I had studied English literature at GCSE. We did the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. And here we are some 20 odd years after that, and I still have no idea why the wife of Bath was on that journey, because I don't get subtext. Literature is not my strong point. And I could have told my teachers that when I was in year 9, and it was quite clear at the same time that French wasn't my strong suit when I was doing that. But of course, I was at the point where I actually was forced, as I say forced, not necessarily, it was a requirement for me to take French GCSE, which I did, and I came out with a okay grade. I passed. It's okay. And like I said, this was some 20 odd years ago, and I'm now looking at the options booklet that came out from the Great School of Grainville this year, because that was the school I went to do my GCSEs, and I'm staggered at how these options have changed over those some 20 years. So this discussion over whether the Curriculum Council is doing its job, it's clearly education is evolving. We are also evolving as a society, and we're understanding the differences that we have in our developmental stages and how people will learn things better. I mean, there's options for GCSEs, there's BTECs, there's other options to go to Highlands to do things which are a bit more practical, because education is received very differently by children of varying ages and varying stages of their development. So to try and then say that we have to shoehorn in French onto, a modern foreign language onto every single student at GCSE, I think isn't the right thing to do. And so I'm actually not going to support the proposition as a whole, but I will urge people to support the amendment, because if the amended proposition is adopted, it has to be done properly, as Deputy Mezek has very well alluded to. I struggle because as I'm hearing through this debate, we're forgetting that it's actually children which is the subject of this debate, and how they respond to their education actually has a really, really significant footprint on how they're going to develop us into adults. And yes, maybe learning a language would help them develop in some ways, but if they do not feel confident or capable of actually learning a language, surely giving them the option to take something else so that they can develop in something that they're interested in. I mean, cookery still, it's called something other than cookery these days, but I should have taken cookery, but I made the wrong choice in my GCSEs. And actually, I think that sometimes maybe children need better support to ensure that they're making the right choices for them, rather than being told that we know best, this is the subject for you. And I feel that that's what this debate is coming into. We're telling children that regardless that they've had no exposure to speaking a foreign language anywhere else, that they have to speak a foreign language. My wife did GCSE and A-level French because she grew up in France for a significant portion of her early days. So it was the right subject for her to take. Given the choice for me, I wouldn't have taken GCSE French because French is not my strong point. I'm slumming my way through learning French at the moment with Alliance Française, and my groups are going to be merged with a couple of other states members, and they're going to hear how equally bad my French speaking is. But I'm still trying, because now it is a choice, and now I realise that actually I want to try and learn it. So actually, I've made the selected choice now because I'm able to make that choice. So I think if this debate was around removing French as an option, or a foreign language as an option entirely, I wouldn't support it, because I think languages are important. But what I do think is important is that young people are encouraged to take the right subjects that are right for them, and not having more lessons forced upon them. So, sir, I would urge members to support the amendment, but I'm not going to support the whole proposition at the second round.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I rise to stand partly in response to Deputy Mezek's assertion that there seems to be a lot of disquiet. I can't remember Deputy Mezek's exact words, but effectively a lot of disquiet about the Jersey Curriculum Council. And it got me thinking, because I kind of agree there does. And so it got me thinking, a bit more about the Curriculum Council, and this is in regard to the proposed amendment. And, you know, we've already mentioned it is only educationalists that sit on the Curriculum Council. There are no employers' representatives, there are no parents' representatives, there are no states members or scrutiny representatives. There are only teachers and members of the department on the Curriculum Council, which, to me, sounds a little short-sighted. Or feels a little short-sighted. But on top of that, it made me think, hold on, surely the minutes of the Curriculum Council are available. I must be able to see the minutes of the Curriculum Council, because we like to be transparent and understand the workings of the way decisions are made. I can't find the minutes of the Curriculum Council anywhere. All I can find with regard to the Curriculum Council are that its minutes will be shared on the Education Department's SharePoint site. And any members of the public who would like to access the minutes can ask the Education Department to access those minutes, which to me, again, felt like, well, no wonder we're feeling a bit, as an assembly, we, according to Deputy Mezek, and I'm in agreement with him here, may be feeling a bit mistrusting of the work, the output of the Curriculum Council, because none of us can see it. None of us really know who are on it. None of us can see the output of it. And yet, we are bound by law, and this comes to the amendment in particular, the Minister is bound by law to consult with the Curriculum Council before making any changes. And this is the bit where I almost feel like, in a sense, we have to go with the amendment being proposed, because by law, the Minister cannot unilaterally change the curriculum without first consulting the Jersey Curriculum Council. He doesn't have to get their permission, but he does have to consult with them.
So would the Minister give way, the member?
Of course.
Does he accept that there's nothing in Part D unamended that stops the Minister from consulting with the Curriculum Council if the states give it a steer?
I cannot clarify that at the moment because I don't have Part D in front of me. I was too busy researching the Curriculum Council. I lost track of that bit. But I'll accept that it doesn't, if that's as the Deputy says. So in that sense, what we do know is, regardless of any decision you make here today with regard to modern languages, the Minister does have to consult the Curriculum Council. That is certainly true. But there was also, I thought, interestingly, there was also on the most recent document about the Jersey Curriculum Council that I can find, it was published in March 2023 under the previous Minister, was a kind of flowchart of how the Curriculum Council shall act in the case of changes being suggested. And it has this flowchart in Appendix 2. Is the review or research part of the JCC's business as usual? If yes, go to Section A. If no, go to Section B. And then it says, basically, is the matter raised relevant to the context of the work of the Curriculum Council? The answer is yes. Sufficient evidence should be presented to the Minister and to the Curriculum Council to state a clear case for review or for changing the Jersey curriculum. This may include government strategic plans, data analysis, preliminary consultation and evidence, policy documentation review, research review to gain an international perspective, status versus future benefits, statement of change. Nothing about whether the States Assembly has a view on it. The Minister and the Curriculum Council will have the opportunity to challenge and clarify the case for change or review, which then makes me think that regardless of what we say or decide in this Assembly today, the Curriculum Council have the ability to challenge and clarify that. The Minister and the Curriculum Council will vote as to whether to adopt the case for changing the Jersey curriculum or to support further review. So, regardless, again, of what we decide here, I believe that the Minister and the Curriculum Council, even if we said, yes, we want more modern languages or we want more French, I believe the Curriculum Council and the Minister will then be voting on whether they agree with us. Regular updates based on the agreed timelines will be presented to the Curriculum Council, either through the officer or for the JCC. The Jersey curriculum is statutory by law. The process for change to both statutory and non-statutory elements should be the same to preserve the rigour of the documentation and appropriate stakeholder engagement. And therefore you must determine a need for change through consultation, present the case to the JCC, gain agreement to proceed, commission a working party or other statutory group with suitable levels of expertise regarding the subject being changed, share completed draft for comment, share draft with SLT and Minister for comment and redraft if required, present draft to the Minister and the JCC for final ratification and comment, minute the agreement, but we can't see those minutes, communicate with the head teachers and/or subject leaders amend all paper copies if the changes are significant, develop a notice or booklet for parents or young people. So it feels to me that regardless of what we decide in this assembly, there's a whole world of bureaucracy that we've got to go through with the Jersey Curriculum Council before any change is brought to bear on this. I do have further to say, which I'll probably keep for the main debate, which is about the lack of, or the fact that employers increasingly are unable to find people with the necessary language skills to do the job. The fact that the number of modern language learners in England has plummeted since the change to the English curriculum, which we've adopted. Because, as the Curriculum Council document says, after their own research, it's best that Jersey sticks to the National Curriculum for England, with some changes for Jersey. So we are tied to the National Curriculum for England, but we do know that language learning in England has plummeted, that we can see from the documents that Deputy Tadier has kindly presented to us that the language learning, French language learning in Jersey state schools has plummeted. Well, actually, the document doesn't say it's plummeted, but I'm assuming it used to be higher than 14.8%. And we are tied to that. And we are tied to the English curriculum. We are tied to the Curriculum Council. I think if anybody's looking for a state's proposition, maybe we should be shining a bit more light on the work of the Curriculum Council. Maybe we should be seeking to present a bit more of a rounded influence on the Curriculum Council, such as employees' representatives or parents' representatives. Maybe these are things, because it seems to me that back in the 1990s when the education law was established, it seems to me that actually the States Assembly gave away a lot of its own influence on that curriculum. Now, I do agree with Deputy Mezek when he was saying ideology should not form part of choices in the curriculum. I do accept that. Interestingly, ideology forms there's a lot of ideology in pedagogy, basically. And so a lot of the methods being used very much today in schools are ideologically driven by discussions within the educational establishment itself. But, and therefore that's one of the reasons why I think it shouldn't just be teachers and educationalists in charge of the curriculum. It should also include parents and employees' representatives to make sure that those ideologies are not being thrust into the Jersey curriculum as well. So I just ask members to bear that all in mind when voting, because I think there's a lot for us to think about with regards to the Jersey Curriculum Council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Quite a few of my points have been already made, but there's a couple that remain. This is ultimately, I think, about our identity as an island, and it's also about a vision of Jersey's future. And I think of that quite often because the Island Identity Project was something with which I was engaged a little bit when Deputy Levy was doing it, even before I became an Assembly member. And I looked back at some of the comments that were made in there, and there were 4 key conclusions mentioned right at the beginning. First, that there is a profound and almost universally shared sense that what we have in Jersey is special. And second, that there is a widely felt sense that something is being lost. And third, we believe that we should be making more of our autonomy to innovate. And that there is also a particular reason why this is important at the moment, because of the changing global situation, Brexit and so on. If you perhaps put all of that together, then what it says is that our island identity is founded on our ability to do something different. It's founded on cultural and heritage differences and the ability that we have to maintain and improve them. And it says, I think, crucially, that in a changing world, we need points of difference. And one of our points of difference, I think, is that we are a very, very connected island. We have an exceptionally international population. We've always been a connected island. We've been connected in terms of all the things we've chosen. The island is famous for, whether that's trade, hospitality, and finance. These are all things which rely on connectivity. And a lot of other great trading nations recognize this in their linguistic policy. The Dutch is an obvious example, highly multilingual and always a very strongly trading nation. So I think I see this in terms of those sorts of ideas about the island's future and a vision, really, for where the island could be. And that's why I think this idea of foreign languages to GCSE has a bigger resonance than just being about a bunch of people in the assembly telling a bunch of students what they should and shouldn't study. It is about deciding what we as an island want ourselves to be known for, want ourselves to be good at in the future. And it seems to me that building our future and committing to that kind of cultural change, that languages are a thing we really believe in, would be a really powerful part of that bigger vision that we need to articulate about where Jersey is going. And I also see it as a kind of an update, if you like, of the fact that we have French and Gériat as part of our tradition. Where might it go next? Where it goes next is into those other languages with nations and cultures that we already have connections with, and Deputy Balash mentioned Portugal, but we also have, of course, East European and now African countries as well, that we can build on those connections, not just as in a transactional way, but in a cultural way as well. So for those reasons, I do think the intent behind this is really quite powerful, actually. So the question with the amendment is, what will the amendment actually do in practice? In poker, sir, there's the reference of a tell. There's a tell, and a tell is a moment when you give an inadvertent clue as to the strength or otherwise of your hand. And I think there's a tell in the report that accompanies this proposition, this amendment. And it came in the final sentence, which says, "It will be important to assess that any changes are not to the detriment of any cohort of students." I submit to the Assembly that that is a bar that is impossible to meet. Any student who doesn't want to do a foreign language will consider this is to their detriment. If student choice is the ultimate arbiter, then we will not have a foreign language as being compulsory, obviously. But we don't take that view as a society. We take the view that, for example, maths, English language, and English literature should be compulsory. And that is tough on students who struggle on those subjects, but we say, yes, it may be tough, but it says something about what we think are the basics of being a part of this society, and therefore we think they should be, you should do that, even if it is tough. And indeed, obviously, also reduces the options to do other subjects, which students might find easier, or they might be more adept at. Listening to the minister's speech, and indeed to some of the ministers, the people who've spoken in support, members who've spoken in support, it does seem clear to me that whatever happens, this review will not lead to compulsory study of foreign languages. The minister is against it, or at least that is the tell, as far as I can see it, in the way he's spoken and in the report. The amendment says that we need to consult, but there was no consultation with students over compulsory maths, English language or literature, and no consultation, or with teachers for that matter, and no consultation when schools started to drop compulsory languages. That wasn't something that I was consulted about, and it does affect my children. Deputy Mezek says it could lead to a postcode lottery depending on which foreign languages were available in different schools. And there may indeed be an element of that, but I say it is at the moment. My son at Holier has to do a compulsory foreign language. My son at Le Kennevet does not. My son at Le Kennevet would have liked to do German, but it isn't an option. So there are already elements of that. What the important thing about the proposition that Deputy Tadyer has brought is that it would set a floor. It would set the minimum requirement. And that would be standard across the island. And that, it seems to me, would be useful and would remove at least one element of the postcode lottery. So there is a difference between a review about whether something is going to happen or whether it's a review about how it happens. And this review has been set up as to be whether it should happen at all. And I think the Minister's review is set up to deliver just one result. And I think, therefore, that supporting this amendment would mean that we would essentially be conducting something that was a waste of time. The Assembly can square the circle, if you like, of consultation and supporting the principle of this amendment by defeating the amendment and simply voting for the main proposition. Because, as several members have said, the main proposition directs the Minister to go away and do what is necessary. That includes the consultation, as mandated by the law. It has to happen. And I've no doubt that if the Minister were to come back with very strong reasons as to why, say, a particular group should be excluded or have some special arrangements, I'm absolutely sure that this Assembly would look very favourably on that. But it would come because there had been an agreement in principle about something, and these were about the details of how it is implemented, not about whether it is implemented at all. So I think that Deputy Mesic said we should do it properly. I say, fine, yes, let's do it properly. But that is a question of execution, not a question about the principle. So I think it is potentially an exciting idea for the island to start building on this idea of connectedness, of an island that is multilingual because it has a multinational population, and that is a positive point of difference that we could build upon. Other members may disagree, and that is absolutely fine. But that is a debate about the main proposition, not about the amendment, so I think we should have a debate about the main proposition, not about the amendment, not about a review, and we should therefore vote against the amendment.
Conor St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And perhaps to begin by saying that if nothing else, the speech by the Sustainable Economic Development Minister shows that there is no three-line whip, which might be of some comfort to some. I have some considerable sympathy with the Minister and the comments of Deputy Mesic in the sense that we have a curriculum and council, and what is their point if they are going to be mandated to carry out something. But in that connection, I pay heed both to Deputy Tadier's comments that effectively there was something that they was fundamentally flawed, they did not like, they could actually ignore that. And certainly Deputy Morell went further by saying that, in effect, I think that any decision by the states today was simply a steer and could be ignored. And if one takes that view, then I question what harm is there by approving the main proposition. I would expect that if it was so approved, that the council would immediately get to work on their process in deciding what was wrong with it and producing some sort of paper saying that. The one aspect I do not like about the amendment is that the report only goes to the Minister. There's no follow-up as to where it goes from there, and it's almost as if the states have started this debate, but we are left out in the cold beyond that. I'm not saying for a moment that was the intention, but it does stop there. And I take heed of the views of Deputy Balash. The timing is such that whatever the results were, it will be hard put into fruition before, during the course of that assembly. So I'm minded to support the proposition as is, on the basis, as I say so, that it would change the burden of proof, if I can put it that way. The lead is given to the council. That's what the states are of a mind to approve. Please go away and think about it. And there is time, not before December this year, but well before that, of the council surely to come back with reasons as to why it shouldn't be done, and certainly with caveats as to areas or groups of people who should not take it. Certainly, I would be appalled if people who are not capable or equipped to deal with take it for an ownership were forced to do it. But my understanding from what Deputy Morell said and what Deputy Taddy has said is that is within the gift of the council to make exceptions. So my tendency, I'd be interested to hear what the Minister says, is summing up as to what are the powers of the council and who do they need to pay attention to. My current intention is to go along with the main proposition on the basis that it is within the ambit of the council's responsibility to neutralise or come back with arguments as to why that shouldn't be done, and as Deputy Renner said, come back to the Assembly, and I'm sure we'd all be very pleased to hear good reason as to why there should be certain exceptions. And with that, so I say I should be interested to hear what the Minister says in response. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. This is a terrific debate and all sorts of different angles on it. So I'm going to just take my take on this, because I think this is about ambition. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the bringer of the proposition on his excellent report and the significant amount of thoughtful research he has provided for this debate. It does beg the question, how do we measure the impact of learning a second language? Because I don't believe I've ever seen any clear metrics other than it's a good idea and we should. At a personal level, I've had many experiences with learning languages. Many of you will know that I was born in Southern Ireland, and in those days, Gaelic was a compulsory language with French only an option in secondary school. But it mattered to the Irish. They'd experienced appalling brutality under the British rule, and now independent, they were going to make sure they re-established their cultural identity, and they did it through language and regaling the stories of the ancestors, all written in Gaelic. Language is so much more than just language. Last weekend, I visited my brother in Paris for a family get-together. Between them, they speak 4 languages. My brother married a Belgian, so learning her language was obviously helpful, and has resulted in him now living and working in Paris. His children, brought up in the French schooling system, have French as their first language, but to ensure they kept their cultural links with my brother's background, he read to them Harry Potter books in English. On his wife's side, her mother is Spanish, and in order for her grandchildren to communicate with her, she has made a huge effort to ensure at least one grandchild is fluent in Spanish, to ensure that that cultural link is not broken. I speak probably like a lot of members in this Assembly with 1 1/4 languages. Enough French to be understood, but insufficient to hold a conversation. And having just had a French experience, I really regret that, knowing my big chance of learning another language was lost to me by not being diligent enough at school. Politicians are really good at putting things off. As you've heard me say on many occasions in this Assembly, jam tomorrow. The window to really learn language is a small one when placed into a lifetime. Thus, when I read the word review, my heart sinks. In reality, that's another opportunity lost to our young generation, our young people who do not have the luxury of time. I just want to put where we are today into context, and it was good to hear the proposer make a similar observation. So much of our language is derived from Latin and Greek languages, once taught at school and now deemed irrelevant and cast aside. I'm not advocating bringing back these languages. However, I had a really interesting conversation with my 22-year-old niece, who's currently studying medicine. When she was in her teens, she chose to study Latin and Greek as an extracurricular lesson, as you would. Something you can do in France. She tells me she's so pleased she made the effort and gave an interesting example as to why. Here's her example. She referenced the 3 anatomical, you need to bear with me everybody, 3 anatomical planes, one of which is the sagittal plane. The word sagitta, she explained, is a Latin word for arrow. Arrows, when fired, pass through the body from front to back. Hence the term sagittal plane. The plane goes from the front to the back of the body. Once you understand the etymology, how much easier is it to learn? A knowledge far greater than the language itself. It reflects that language can be a window to so much more. I conclude my speech with a totally contrasting experience I had over the weekend. I went into an internationally renowned coffee shop in Paris and was staggered that the menu was mostly written in English, the ultimate in cultural imperialism. The title read, "When Chocolate Meets Caramel." You can guess the kind of place I was in. Below, it deigned to use one French word, édition limitée. Sorry, that's two, but edition is spelled in English. And then followed this up with golden caramel, white hot chocolate. Just in case you happen to be a French person living in France whose first language wasn't English, there was a small note in the bottom left-hand corner of the sign which read, "When chocolate meets caramel equals quand le chocolat rencontre le caramel." This is about enrichment. This is about broadening cultural knowledge. I do not understand why our European neighbours are able to find the time our minister doesn't believe is available to our young people. Where is our ambition for our young people? My nephew and niece are now citizens of the world. Their ambitions, their opportunities are in no small part because of their multilingualism. Isn't that what we should demand for our young people? I urge people to vote against the amendment.
Thank you. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, and my apologies for not being in the States Assembly whilst I'm still getting over a health issue. So far, the arguments, or at least even this proposition, it seems to be based on an off-the-cuff societal needs analysis. It's basically saying we need this because of our cultural tradition or for other reasons. And it doesn't seem to really be focusing on the needs of the children. And I do understand the cynicism that can come from actually saying, oh, well, this is kicking something in the long grass by getting people to look at it. When the minister is actually proposing that educational experts look at this, who have a knowledge about the independent and individual needs of children, I think that what I'm hearing actually alarms me a little, because suddenly what I'm hearing is not a debate about putting children first or the needs of children. It's about imposing a political will on children to make some sort of point. And I am a linguist and I have a real love of languages, but I will be the first to say for some it's a positive and some that it can really help develop them. But then there are others who just don't have the aptitude or don't have it at the time that they're in school. And indeed, whose whole mental wiring may be more geared towards another type of language like maths, which is a language as far as I'm concerned. It's more comfortable with the rational rather than the irrational, which is a language. And to be saying to those children, well, don't forget, don't worry about thinking that you're at school, that we can make you the best that you can be and allow yourself to develop and evolve as you go on. You will do this even if you don't enjoy that. I find that absolutely horrific. I might remind the bringer of the proposition how not so long ago he and I were at a school, and in fact he raised the matter that who's bringing this proposition, and I happened to ask the students if they would support it, and indeed none of them actually suggested that they would. And again, somehow the teacher quickly moved away from the subject. But I was thinking, well, I'd like to learn a bit more about why they feel this way. But I actually instinctively think I know why they feel that way. It is up to them. They know whether they enjoy a subject or not. And surely, when it comes to creating value in terms of what even has been discussed about having people who actually really are extraordinarily fluent, whether it's French or whatever language, it's going to be better value to be putting resources into supporting them more. I mean, one thing that I mentioned to Deputy Tadier was just that we have all these links with Normandy. Those children who really do love French, why are we not doing more for them by actually using these links, having more in the way of school exchanges? And instead we're saying, oh no, we're just going to force all children to learn a language up to this level, no matter what their own desire and what their aptitude is. I mean, I just can't believe that I'm hearing this. And then let's come back to our neighbours in France themselves. Do they actually force this sort of thing on their school children as well? So far, I can't find that they can. But what I will point out is that they've got a well-known phrase called liberté, égalité, and fraternité. And that liberté, that really comes down to this idea of a right of access. We would be wrong to deprive children of the ability to learn a language. And I do believe that the government's amendment, the main propositionist amendment, recognises that. But we also have to recognise that to some extent, this whole idea about equality isn't particularly suitable, and people do have different competencies. There is a distinction to be made between a language and, say, the 3 R's. If I have a child and I have them going around in this island, they will need to do maths just to be, it's a basic survival thing. But to speak another language, I would say no. So I would I would actually urge members to be a little bit more generous about this amendment, to be a bit more respectful about the Curriculum Council. No, they don't publish minutes, but then neither do the Employment Forum. And if it comes to transparency, then I think many ministers might be opening themselves to criticism in that respect. I've seen some of the FRI requests recently, and there's much that's not being shared. So I will, therefore, notwithstanding the position that's been discussed, will be supporting the amendment, and I would ask members to bear that in mind, particularly because one of the things that the Curriculum Council is being asked to do is to look at the cost of this. And when I looked at the report to the main proposition, and I saw the section that was to do with financial implications, I would say that, in fact, it was a fudge. And for those who are interested in what the French for fudge is, if those who are interested in what the French for fudge is, it happens to be caramel. And those who are interested in the French for caramel, that's caramel too. And it sort of just struck me. It's one of those things that, much as I love French, it does have its limitations. Anyway, I'll rest it there, sir. Thank you.
So could I ask a point of clarification from the Speaker if she'd give way?
Do you give way for a point of clarification, Deputy Scott?
Oh, yes, of course.
The member suggested that in France was she suggesting that in France they don't require or force, I think was her words, to students to study a second language until the age of 16?
I cannot find, I haven't found, in the brief research that I've done, I haven't found conclusive evidence that they do, but if
would she
I'm wrong, then
I think, would she review that, sir, because I think it is compulsory up at least to the age of 16 in France.
Well, there we are.
I think that that's something that the curriculum, I'd rather hear that from the Curriculum Council than from an individual member, with perfect respect, sir. But thank you. I note the Deputy's position.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. I was only going to speak once, and that was going to be in the main proposition, but I am going to combine my comments and talk about the amendment as well. We seem to have heard many drawbacks of this proposition throughout the debate on the amendment. But to me, this really does seem to have been put in the too difficult tray by the Minister. and I echo the comments that were made by Deputy Balash about the Curriculum Council. I don't know what's happened in the last 50 years or so, but I had an excellent French education. I started learning French at the age of 5 or 6 at St Lawrence Primary School. Many of the teachers were French speakers themselves. I continued in secondary school with specialist teachers, one of whom is sitting in front of me, through sixth form, and I went to university in Brittany to study French. I had no family background in French. My parents are both northerners, and neither ever studied an additional language, although my father did try his best in French. I've gone on to use my languages, particularly French, but also Spanish, throughout my career. And indeed, I was able to successfully apply for certain roles because I spoke good French. In my role as the previous Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, the ability to speak French was incredibly useful. I didn't require an interpreter to develop good relationships. I could discuss matters of mutual interest in depth with my French counterparts, which resulted in positive outcomes, particularly in regard to negotiations around the carte d'identité scheme. So as a French speaker, I was able to join the Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie as an executive member. And in July last year, together with Deputy Kovac, we travelled to Montreal for the annual conference. And I heard presentations from academics about current research about how good language teaching and learning is proven to be a catalyst for a much more rounded education, including for children with additional needs, surprisingly, and that was an area that interested me particularly. Some members have said during this debate that there's no evidence to suggest that language learning is beneficial, but at that conference, plenty of evidence was presented to suggest that achieving proficiency in one or more foreign languages offers a variety of benefits. There are many reasons to grasp the nettle here, including the cognitive advantages. Learning multiple languages enhances cognitive skills such as problem solving, creativity, critical thinking. Bilingual students often perform better on standardized tests. Research consistently shows that multilingual individuals have better problem solving skills, enhanced memory, and increased mental flexibility. Learning a new language stimulates the brain, it keeps it active and engaged. Cultural awareness, academic performance, career opportunities, social skills. Bilingual students develop stronger social skills. They learn to navigate different cultural contexts and communicate with a wider range of their peers. Lifelong learning. Language learning encourages a love for learning, fostering lifelong curiosity and engagement with new languages and cultures. The main proposition requires the Assembly to buy into a vision, an ambition and an aspiration, one that was put on the shelf when the compulsory language learning ceased in 2014. I'm very concerned, and I've said before in this Assembly, that we've already let the International Baccalaureate at Holia fall away, further depleting our breadth of language teaching. That course required all students to study a modern foreign language at either standard or higher level. I wonder whether the Curriculum Council were consulted on that, and whether parents, students and staff were consulted. As a parent whose children studied that qualification, I would have had very firm views that it should not have been discontinued. I concur with Deputy Tadier. The bar needs to be higher. We should not be slavishly following the UK. And again, picking up on comments from other members during the discussion of this amendment, why are we saying that children should only study the things that they like? Should we only give the children the choice to eat Monster Munch if they don't like broccoli and cabbage? They maybe enjoy eating Monster Munch, but it doesn't bring them optimal nutritional value. And if we look at the actual statistics, the actual Jersey statistics, we can see what happened when students were given the choice to stop doing something where there was evidence to suggest that it improves the quality of their education. There's been a significant drop. At Hope Valley, statistics in 2008-2009 show there were 101 full GCSE students of French. In 2024, this is just 14. And regardless of the fact that I was compelled to take maths at GCSE, I can't work out what that percentage drop is, but I can tell you it's a big one. If our forebears in this Assembly had not focused on the future, our here and now would be there and then. static and rooted in the past as a result of a lack of ambition and the aspiration to be different. Jersey is different. We are a special place. Learning modern foreign languages is not about just acquiring new words and grammar, knowing how to order a beer in 6 different languages. It's about equipping ourselves and our future generations with the tools to thrive in a global society. Reinstating compulsory language learning in the curriculum at Key Stage 4 is about an investment in cultural understanding, cognitive development and professional success. And the Minister for Sustainable Economy talked about professional success. It's an opportunity to explore the possibilities of providing a rich, multifaceted educational experience that reflects our unique island identity and one that will prepare our children to operate effectively in a diverse and interconnected world. The ability to cross linguistic barriers is not just an asset, it's a necessity. Learning a foreign language broadens our horizons. It opens the door to understanding different cultures, perspectives, and ways of life. And this cultural awareness fosters empathy and tolerance, all of which are essential qualities in our world that changes at a rapid pace. And it's for that reason that I will be supporting the main proposition, unamended, and I therefore encourage other members to do the same and to reject this amendment, which, in the words of Deputy Balash, merely kicks it into the long grass. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I thank Deputy Tadier for bringing this proposition. I believe the teaching of modern languages is really important. I too am keen on encouraging modern languages. I would, however, prefer to have a conversation with the head teachers, the staff, students and parents. It would be good to have their understanding and thinking. I would rather work collaboratively with them and their language staff than force them to do something they do not consider the most appropriate for their students. I'm very much in favour of encouraging foreign language learning, but not necessarily making things mandatory. The Minister of Education has not said no. The Jersey Curriculum Council has not said no. Sir, I ask you to support this amendment and please vote for this amendment.
Deputy Joseph.
Monsieur le Président, je me lève pour m'opposer à l'amendement du ministre de l'Éducation. Ce débat ne porte pas seulement sur les choix de les matières enseignées, il s'agit de notre identité, de notre héritage et de notre place dans le monde. Nos langues officielles sont le français et l'anglais. Jersey reste encore un territoire bilingue. Sir, I'm not going to continue in French because I know and I hear the words of Nelson Mandela, who said, if you talk to an individual in a language they understand, it goes to their head. If you talk to them in a language, in their language, it goes to their heart. And whether or not members are French enabled or not, I know that I'm going to be speaking. Maybe it's already a done deal, I don't know. But I'm going to have my say on languages because like Deputy Tadier, like Deputy Balash, like Deputy Moore, like other members who have, whose lives I think have been changed in ways that one could never imagine by the teaching of language, and particularly French, mine has. So this is not a debate about curriculum choices. I think this is really, and following the wise remarks of Deputy Balash and Deputy Tadier and those others, Deputy Renish, Deputy Miles, this is a debate about really Jersey's identity. It's a debate about our heritage. It's a debate about our place in the world. Jersey is still a bilingual jurisdiction. French and English are our 2 official languages. I realise that Gérier was added a few years ago, but it has been historically the case that French and English are our 2 national languages. I ask members, Is there another jurisdiction, another country in the world that does not mandate the teaching of their national language in their schools? I cannot find one, sir, and Jersey should not be one either. So you will be well aware, and your deputy, when I have addressed this assembly in French, you both have the ability to preside over this assembly in the French language or English. You have been lawyers that are familiar with the French and English languages. Our constables, les connétables, have our roads in French. We'll forget the definite article, I won't go on about that today. But our history, we see it everywhere. We walk into this assembly as we take our privileged positions as members of this assembly, and we see a board with all of your predecessors since 1277, and it is inscribed in French. We see Walter Raleigh's Gouverneur de Jersey, Île Reconnaissante. We are that island. We are not England. But in recent years, there has been a systematic erosion of language teaching in our schools. I would say, and I don't know, and I congratulate Deputy Tadyer on his research, I have asked and wondered how it could be that this decision was made to drop the requirement of language, or particularly French language. How was it? I wondered. I have never been in this assembly and had a debate about the changing of the historic situation of French being mandatory because it's one of our national languages in education. I don't think there's ever been a debate. I've had debates in the budget about French language teaching, and I've rebelled, sir, against the Ministerial or Council of Minister collective whip. Even as the Treasury Minister, I did it, because I wanted to keep real French-speaking language assistants. And I think that there are some members that will remember the frowns that were done on that. I didn't hear what Deputy Sutton said, sir. Sir, the proposition before us seeks to reverse that decline by ensuring that modern language study is extended to Key Stage 4, ages 14 to 16. The Minister's amendment, and is the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning, seeks to water this down. Instead of committing to action, it proposes endless reviews, consulting this non-democratic body called the Curriculum Council, which I never knew had made a decision to abolish our heritage and change the course of Jersey's history. It is wrong. And I would actually say that this debate is about putting back what was the proper arrangements of education. I never understood why that the French language and language tuition was quietly dropped bit by bit. We do not need a review, sir. We do not need to consult this Curriculum Council. We need to be clear about why languages in Jersey and the teaching of it has collapsed. We know why it happened. Over a decade ago, the Jersey, by stealth, without a democratic decision of this assembly, followed the United Kingdom's flawed decision of making languages optional beyond the age of 14. I would say that it was an undemocratic position. I remember asking the Minister for Education, Connétable of the Constable of St Clement, various ministers of education, what was going on? What was it? I don't have children, so I didn't know. But now I know, and I thank Deputy Tadyer for bringing this to our attention, because effectively what we now realise is it's happened by stealth. The results were entirely predictable. Fewer students, learners studying languages, fewer qualified language teachers, a diminished cultural and economic outlook for Jersey. If we look around ourselves, the example of Finland was used, Luxembourg, Latvia. Students easily, effortlessly learning 2 or 3 languages as part of their standard education. In Jersey, many now leave school barely able to order a meal if they go to France. We should not be following the flawed United Kingdom system, where language learning has plummeted. We should be following the footsteps of our forefathers and foremothers, being an outward-looking island, a trading entrepot, a rich tapestry where different people spoke different languages. Gérier, French, English, conversed effortlessly, and that's why we welcomed communities. Our Portuguese, Spanish, our valued Romanian community, Polish. We are an international island, always have been and always will be. Bilingualism, multilingualism should be seen as an essential part of our island. It's an essential skill for our island's youngsters. It's not just about, in fact, cultural heritage. As the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, and I can use that word without a wry smile, is it about an economic opportunity? We are an outward-facing island. We trade internationally. We heard this morning about questions about our international footprint in our valued services sector. Whether it is in finance, hospitality, law, agriculture, and the industries of the future, the green energy, opportunities of hydrogen, a French wind farm, a French hydrogen thing, it is about multinationalism, not Anglicism. And the ability to make those early journeys, those early efforts to learn a second language should be, in my world and in the world that I have lived, an essential skill. We didn't have a say in Brexit. Our links are with the world. And yes, the European Union is having a bit of a rethink in the United Kingdom, but we're different. We always were. And I believe that for the future of our island, we need the next generation to be able to communicate, not with AI bots, but with their hearts and with their souls. They need to be able to communicate. As Deputy Renouf spoke about the importance economically, I don't think we would have got the agreement with the French in fishing if it wasn't for the fact that we actually spoke to them in French, respected them, and spoke to their hearts. We've seen so many times, and we hear so much of it. Oh, we're going to have a review. Oh, we need to consult this or that. A delayed decision. Actually, Deputy Balash was right. It's this issue to be quietly forgotten. I do not want to make that happen, and I ask members, I ask the benches of the Connétable, if they want to be called Connétable, let the youngsters of Jersey learn what the etymology of Connétable is. Otherwise, I'm going to call them the anglicised constable, sir. And to my colleague deputies, les députés, whether they be in government or not, look into your hearts and souls, I say to them, sir. Look into them and think about what the future is. There are many arguments about making languages that I've heard, compulsory teaching I've heard about, but it just simply doesn't add up to scrutiny. We do not allow students to drop maths at 14. We do not allow them to stop studying science. Why should languages of our culture, languages of our island be any different? I have never, ever, sir, in all of my life, met anybody who regrets learning a language. Never. What I have done is I've met lots and lots and lots of people who regret dropping a language. And so before the ministerial whip is administered, if it is that, I'm not sure, but before it is, I ask members, think about our culture, think about our heritage, think about where we've come from and where we're going. Nous devrons être ambitieux pour notre jeune, Monsieur le Bailly. Nous devrons rétablir le français et les autres langues modernes. We should be ambitious for our future. We should be ambitious for our restoration of languages and other language at the heart of our curriculum. We should be rejecting this amendment. We should be decisive. We shouldn't be delaying. We should put it back, and we should stand up for Jersey's culture, its identity, and our future. Let us not be the generation that allowed languages and French to fade from our classrooms and fade and get erased like a piece of Anglican history. I want liberté for our children. I want liberty. I want égalité. I want equality. And I want fraternité with our multilingual counterparts, whether they be French or any other. Vive notre île bilingue, Monsieur le Bailly. I ask members to reject the amendment.
Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to talk on the amendment because I think we'll get onto the main proposition eventually, but I think our focus needs to really be on the amendment and what that actually does. There is nothing, and many members have decided to speak about the main proposition, but I think the meaning behind this amendment needs to be fully understood. There is nothing in this amendment that is stopping a language from being, or the possibility of a language being taught into Key Stage 4. That's a fact. This amendment solely tries to ensure that if we are going to do that, that we do that in an informed manner, sir. So it would be completely irresponsible of us to do something without knowing the full extent and the impact that this would have, not only on students, not only on professionals, but also on the cost as well to the department. And just talking about the cost, sir, and professionals. So, modern foreign languages teachers are actually in short supply. And I'm pretty sure that nobody here would want to implement something that we then cannot staff effectively. We have seen the issues with that has happened in the past when we have had non-specialist teachers teaching subjects, and how difficult it is at the moment to recruit, let alone if we are to change the curriculum in any way. So this amendment just seeks to ensure that whatever we do it in an informed manner. It also writes into this the commitment for the Minister to come back to the Assembly and to present this at the end of this year. So there will be another opportunity for members to be able to make an informed decision on whether this is the correct way to go. Now, sir, I am concerned by some people's comments about the Curriculum Council, especially those actually from Deputy Balash, who himself on 2 previous occasions has lodged amendments to ensure that another body is involved before a decision is made. And examples of these are, for example, when Deputy Balash lodged P6/2023, the bilateral treaty with the UAE, where it was to ensure that the Legislative Advisory Panel was involved as, and I quote, "It has a general responsibility for what is sometimes termed as lawyer's law and seems the appropriate body to prepare legislation for the consideration of the Council of Ministers." In addition, I take on board the comments that the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development made regarding the composition of the Jersey Curriculum Council. However, under Schedule 5, there is the opportunity for the Curriculum Council to co-opt members as considered necessary. Now, this does mean that if we go ahead with a review and a consultation, that as part of that, the Jersey Curriculum Council may well decide that actually they do want parents involved in that. They do want representation from students, from parents, from businesses. So like I said at the beginning, I'm not talking on the main proposition. I am solely talking here on the amendment. This amendment is a safeguard. This is a safeguard to ensure that we're doing the right thing for our students, that we have the money and that we know the costings behind this, because there will be a cost, sir, and that we are well resourced to do this. And I think that it would be irresponsible of members to vote against this. So, sir, I would urge members to please vote in favour of the amendment, regardless of how you may feel about the main proposition. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And please excuse me if my voice goes a bit, I've got a bit of an echo all today. Having said that, it's a very obvious contrast between the last two speakers, where one spoke deeply from the heart and the next speaker gave the information, I believe, and spoke from the head. And this is an issue where we cannot get swept away with the heart. We must look at the information involved and the limits of what we can and can't do. Now, I've been around for so long, I've actually been a member of the Curriculum Council at one stage 40 years ago, and very dignified and proper meetings they were. It seems to me that we didn't have very many minutes, because what we used to do was have a cup of tea at 4:30. We're a bit late today. 4:30, we would be in there to meet the Education Committee. Ooh, ding a ding. This was this time when we had presidents of education, of committees. I believe at the time I was there, Senator Jeune was the minister, no, not the minister, sorry, the president of the Education Committee, and Deputy Moran, I believe, was his assistant, vice president, and I remember also seeing at one stage Constable Lefevre there. It was seen as a very heavyweight committee to preside over. And I think, in terms of what we're talking about today, I have perhaps 3 quotes that stick in my memory from those times when we had the proper china out and we would circulate round, just meeting and chatting as we were prone to do. Hard decisions were not made. They were another body. I'll talk about those in a minute. But I'm reminded of 3 things. One was about having a chat about golf and the merits of. And the Director of Education, I remember it well, John Rodhouse at the time, said to me, you know, Jeff, he said, some people like you practice being a union representative. Others choose to play golf. I heartily recommend, Jeff, that you learn to play golf. That stuck with me, and I have played golf since, but very badly. It's far better, I think, as a union rep. The other quote that gets me, and I won't say who it was, for obvious reasons, when I've finished saying it, a quote that came from a member of the committee who said, very proudly, our books. I read a book once, he said. It had a green cover. And that was the only description I could get out of it. It had a green cover. That was the level of debate, I think, that we had at the time. As a practical way of illustrating what we're talking about today, I remember one of my students, when I taught at Le Cannevet, when I was a language teacher, taught at Le Cannevet, And he came bouncing in one Monday morning, full of the joys of spring, and said, "Thank you, sir, thank you, sir, thank you, sir." I said, what happened? He said, "I got a job in the market this weekend." And do you know what it was about? What made it? And I gave me the job and said, I knew what the French for pamplemousse was. And I could identify the grapefruit pamplemousse. And that got me a job. So thank you, sir. So a practical level of a second language. But I've been involved in this debating chamber for possibly, some would argue, too long. I can remember back in the days, and Senator Deputy Joseph has just mentioned it, where one of the things we were proud of were our language assistants. So we had a couple of French assistants, a German assistant, and a Spanish assistant. And the committee that I was on with were very proud of the French assistants, and that system, and were extremely pleased with the way in which that got our students and gave them an advantage over others. And I've been involved in 2 campaigns now to restore or preserve French, the language assistance in my time. And when I compare what was then with the argument that's been put today by the Minister, it says education has changed. That for me says including the assistants. They've all gone, the assistants. We don't rely on them anymore, even to enhance the training of our students. The logical case, not led by the heart but by the mind, is one which requires us to change as circumstances change. And in the last 10, 14 years, we have remarkably changed what constitutes a curriculum and what we have or have not borrowed from the UK. So I would support this amendment as part of the whole shebang.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I suppose I should start by declaring an interest insofar as my daughter teaches languages, French and Spanish, at Kennevet. She works at a thriving school in a thriving language department, where she describes business as being very good in the interest in languages. And I always get slightly concerned, whilst I like debate from the heart. We've seen some real passion here, and quite right, it's right. I mean, Deputy Taddy has been passionate about this. Many of us are passionate about our French heritage and our culture and our history, but I do get slightly nervous with this Assembly tries to implement things, tries to enforce things, in this case with a curriculum, without really respecting or observing the process. Now, I know we all often complain about processes, but in this instance, we are not qualified to be deciding on what curriculums should be. How many of us are in touch with modern education, with the makeup of our schools? I've been visiting schools since I've been privileged to do this job as elected by this Assembly with the Education Minister, and I have been astounded at what's going on in our schools, positively astounded. This island is made up now of many more nationalities than it was, and I am absolutely bowled over by the way our education system is dealing with this, a hugely difficult and challenging job, but I don't know how many languages being spoken. Now, we mustn't lose sight of our history, culture and heritage, but I believe it's also important that we show respect for our processes, and in this case, it would be in supporting the amendments that Deputy Award has brought to find that balance that will hopefully get us all to the same place or to the right place at the end of the debate. Now, there's been, because this is a debate that's of cultural importance, some may say to us there's been some speeches from the heart. And some people against Deputy Ward's amendments will focus on one aspect of it, while others will focus on the other. So I just want to just try and present a little bit of balance. And there is no doubt that the question of whether French and other languages should be mandatory in Jersey schools involves many considerations, not the ones we like to cherry pick. There are many considerations we should consider. Of course, the cultural relevance. Jersey has strong historical ties to France that we're all proud of, and an understanding of the French language, if we just choose French, could act to not only maintain but strengthen those ties in the future. Might be quite handy after the ferry process, actually. There are economic opportunities. Proficiency in French and other European languages may enhance, or will enhance probably, job prospects for some islanders, especially in tourism and hospitality and international business sectors, international relations, external relations, and the work we do with overseas. And there is no doubt that there are cognitive benefits. Learning a second language or two or three languages has been shown beyond doubt to improve cognitive abilities, enhance problem solving, and increase overall academic performance. We are all agreed on that, and I think somewhere, Deputy Ward might have mentioned it, but somewhere between, I don't know, 30, 40, 50%, and I don't know the percentage go to GCSE in a language. It's pretty good. But those that choose it for a reason. But making French and other languages compulsory could also present several disadvantages or challenges. Resource allocation, for example, as I think a number of members have mentioned, implementing mandatory French, German, Spanish, whatever languages we do, will require additional resources, including hiring additional teachers, which will strain the school budgets. We know how challenging all of our budgets are at the moment, and that is a fact. If we go along this route without proper consideration, we're going to have to build this into our budgets, and not only that could lead to, depending on how we budget, how much money we have available, tax receipts and the other balance of payments, it could mean we're having to divert funds from other essential areas. We're going to have to spread that expenditure. Mandating a French will also limit another language the flexibility in the curriculum.
So would the Minister give way? Point of correction. So I think the Minister said to mandate French, but could he acknowledge this doesn't seek to mandate French, but to give a choice of languages for GCSE?
Yes, absolutely, sir. I focus on French, but if I say French, rather than say, any other language, I'll try and refer to other languages. But introducing compulsory languages will limit the flexibility of the curriculum, reducing time available for other subjects, including STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, arts, or even other languages that might be more relevant in the interest of some students, given the broad range of nationalities we now have living here on the island. I don't know about other members, but when I was a boy, I tended to do well at subjects I was interested in, and if I wasn't interested in something, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get to grips with it. And compulsory subjects can lead to student disinterest, particularly if they do not see the relevance of learning a particular subject. And learning, whilst it's important to many of us, learning a second language is not going to be irrelevant to many of our young people as they go through the education system. But I would point out one of the first things the Minister did when he took office was change the name to Education and Lifelong Learning to present opportunities to learn. There's and we all develop at different levels, at different stages academically. And many people do better in lifelong learning. They come out of school not having worked as hard as they might have done, but then they have great opportunities these days to learn subjects and languages. And that's why we should welcome that move. And I'm sure the team there are going to work hard to make sure lifelong learning is enhanced for all islanders. Of course, there's parental opposition. Some parents may oppose mandatory languages, believing that it takes away from time that could be spent on other important skills. These are genuine issues that we need to consider. Students whose primary language is English or another language. Don't forget there are children in schools coming through now whose primary language is another language. It's not English or French, it's another language. So we have to take that into account. Those are just some of, I think, the considerations this Assembly needs to take into account when we make the decision today. I would like to see more French spoken. I wish I could speak better French. I can order a couple of beers and get by if I listen hard, and after a few days in France I pick it up. And that is one of the regrets I've had. But perhaps when I leave this job or leave this Assembly, so I'll have the time to maybe do that. And I think we must just remember that balance now between the passionate speeches we've heard today and those considerations we should consider when making this decision, and not impose something on the Education Minister and the team, okay, that isn't properly thought through. Now, he's given us a commitment that he will work with the Curriculum Council and take advice and try and find a way where we can get a position, Deputy Tadier, where all of us can feel comfortable with, that is practical and the right solution for our young people moving forward. So I would urge in this instance members to please support the amendments to this proposition, which will allow us to move forward as an Assembly in a measured and appropriate way, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I will come back in my speech to the process and to the Curriculum Council, promise. But I would like to start with how we consult with children. And us as a state members, we participate in school Year 5 debates. On the 20th of January, Janvrin School, 2 classes from Janvrin School, the theme of the debate, primary schools in Jersey should have a multilingual learning approach in their curriculum. Guess how the vote of both classes gone? It has been adopted by one class it's unanimously and another class by majority of the votes. I wish the state's members would listen to the Year 5 students, how important for them to have languages in their curriculum. I had after conversation and asked these children, which languages? First of all, you need to understand, it's town school. In town school, 70%, sometimes more, sometimes less, children, English is actually their second language. So they're all bilingual or multilingual. Actually, I had children that are multilingual. So for us to study, I think it's not for us, for English-speaking countries to study a second language, it's an extra pressure and maybe a luxury, but for them, they come to school with hardly any English. When I asked which language you would like to study, it was language like Portuguese and Polish. I was surprised, half of the class wanted to study Japanese. And I was like, wow, We don't have many Japanese people on the island, but this is what they tell. And this is what I'm trying to say. Somebody, I think Deputy Mazik talked about the postcode. I think we do have a postcode, because if you fortunate enough be in La Caneve, you would have more opportunities to study modern languages. But if you would be in different school, yes, it's all, I know that it's all obviously and it's available, but it's about the dedication and it's about how teachers saying what we are doing. Actually, I'll go back to my speech. I'll not react on reactions as well here. Yes, children have a choice to study languages. And actually, we do have Polish school that preparing children already to GCSEs. And what I need to be involved when I was a minister, I need to actually try to ask and speak with the head teachers that will arrange to do GCSEs for the children that are already prepared by different school, but it was not ability in some of the school to actually arrange GCSE for the children that are ready to take them. Now, going back to compulsory, does member really think that in Soviet Union, there is no perspective to travel anywhere around the world, English language, which was compulsory, was on the top of my priorities? Probably not. Maths were there, up there, physics, chemistry, but definitely not English. If I wouldn't have English compulsory, I don't think that I would be standing here today and working in this language. And it's about to consider what is compulsory and what is not. Now, I would like to address, it was another comment from the minister that the children will not be able to learn to all GCSEs, some GCSEs will need to take, if it's 8 GCSEs, 7 GCSEs. We know that even currently, not all children taking all GCSEs, and maybe actually language, one of the languages, would work well for them and they will be successful. It's something to consider. Another argument against the amendment, timetable is very busy. Absolutely. Timetable is very busy, and it's very difficult to incorporate languages. The question how Holia and JCG manage to incorporate languages, and they have very good results. It's still the same time that they study at school. Teachers. We don't have enough teachers, and it's right, we don't have enough teachers. The less children study languages, the less children will go to the university to study languages, the less teachers we would have. It's the circle that needs to be broken. We spoke today about AI, and actually I'm not sure how Holia progressed with this, because it was a conversation how we allow to children to choose more than foreign language to study. Like Deputy Ranov said that his son wanted to study in the country of German. And it was a conversation in school that it is a teacher in the class, and at the same time there is an option to go online and to have proper tutors online, and they can have different languages according to their choice with the teacher who can guide them through the process. So there are other options how we can teach languages in the 21st century, which might require less resources. Actually, I'm really, really grateful for my daughter's school that apparently other schools have this resource, but they're not using. It calls Linguoscope, that each child, after they are learning French for 30 minutes, they can pick up any language, guess which language my daughter picked up, and they can learn this language for another 30 minutes, whatever language they want, and they can try in different languages. Deputy Mazik said maybe Spanish would go and Italian will not go, maybe French would go. I wish it would be that easy. Now, going to the Curriculum Council. It's important to, I think that it's important to emphasize that Curriculum Council is doing very, very important and very thorough work supporting minister with the curriculum decisions. Now, who is making decision? The decision is the minister's decision. Curricular Council is advising for the minister. Exactly, yes, Curricular Council advising for the minister. But it would be very interesting to understand who is chairing now Curriculum Council, because usually it's delegated responsibility to the Director of Education that currently we don't have somebody in post for Director of Education. I assume it's the minister chairing the Curriculum Council. And for me, if minister is clear that the foreign modern language support children and students' future, this is the policy, this is the vision. And I remember working with the Curriculum Council. It took us a year and a bit with PSHE curriculum, and I'm grateful to the minister that the minister published as it is. But I remember we had backwards and forwards with Curriculum Council, which I was very clear. Every recommendations from the Youth Parliament included in their report needs to be incorporated in the PSHE curriculum. And we need to work it out, how does it work? And it did take longer than a year, and it has been published. For me, it's about, and the timeline. The timeline is September 2026, and I assume that it's another year and a half. I assume if minister would come back, it's still time to how phased approach can be implemented. I can see, I will not take it longer. I really connected to what Conor Tubb of St. Martin said. It's about a mindset. It's about, Deputy Miles and I connected to this. It's about vision, ambition, and aspiration. Bilingual individuals, and this is statistics a bit, I cannot do without statistics, have much as 35% greater job perspective with their ability to bridge cultural divides and facilitate communication in multicultural environment. 35% of greater job perspectives for our students. And their wages up to 20% high. Is it not a lifelong skills that we would like to have for our children? It's about, not about the minister, it's not about the us, it's about the future of our children, of my child and other children and students. We need to think how we are supporting them and the skill that will be more and more required in the future. And I would be rejecting the amendment.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment? Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. I want to start with the quote I ended my speech on the bilingual French schools debate from the French politician and economist Jacques Delors. It sums up exactly what I believe this proposition is about. Apprendre une langue, c'est ouvrir une porte sur le monde. In English, it means to learn a language is to open a door to the world. I just want to make you have an imagination exercise now. And with already knowing how useful the math or science are in our day-to-day life, to imagine this is not already compulsory, and that is what we want to introduce now, for all the benefits it brings. I'm pretty sure that the arguments against it would be the same. Doesn't this rather show more resistance to change based on the unknown? But we all agree that math and science are very useful for everyone to have it mandated on, right? And I strongly believe that's the same case with languages. Let me tell you again a bit about my own journey. Learning French and English in school gave me the chance to travel, study, and work abroad. It's what brought me to Jersey and has led me here today as a politician representing a community I care about deeply. Back in school, French and English were part of the curriculum. If not for that, I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn them. Financially constraints or lack of time would have not made it my choice. But knowing English opened doors for me to work in the US and Jersey. Speaking French helped me also part study in France, in Lyon, and now it helps me to connect and collaborate with global leaders in different parliaments of APF. Even knowing just a little bit of other languages has helped me get by much easier while traveling. Knowing another language is powerful. It opens doors to travel, to study, to build a career, and to network across borders. It's a tool that shapes futures. That's why we need to make sure every young person in Jersey has access to learning a second language, up to the point where they reach a meaningful level of fluency. This isn't just about education. It's about giving future generations skills that will serve them for life. The benefits of learning a second language are clear. Research shows that bilingual people have better memory, problem-solving skills, and flexibility. Studies even link bilingualism to better focus, creativity, and a lower risk of dementia in later years. It makes you better at communicating, learning easier, even additional languages, and boosting your career in an increasingly global job market. But there's more. Bilingualism builds cultural awareness, empathy, and adaptability. It helps young people understand different perspectives, making them more open-minded and engaged in the world. I'm glad to see there's agreement on the need to ensure that all students, regardless of their home language, receive the support they need to develop and preserve it. A child's home language is a vital part of their identity and culture, and by nurturing it, we help them integrate more fully into their communities. Equally important is the opportunity for their peers to learn about and appreciate different cultures. I'm particularly pleased to be able to play a role in supporting children with Romanian as their home language, or those wishing to learn it, through funding arrangements provided by the Romanian government. I know the Education Minister has the best intentions at heart for both children and teachers, and I truly believe he is doing a great job in the department. I welcome the parts of the accepted amendments. However, I don't fully agree with parts D and E of the amendment, and I'll explain why. The original proposal D called for students to learn at least one modern language other than English up to the age of 16 by September 2026. It was a call for action, making sure all students get strong language skills. The amended proposal D and E, which is linked, however, adds a review by the Jersey Curriculum Council, which will report back in December 2025. While this review is well-intended, it doesn't guarantee action. A review could still be part of the original plan, no need to delay the action needed. Also, the Curriculum Council consists only of teachers. There's no representation, development experts, parents, or the students themselves. While the teachers want what's best for the children, they could be biased on this, especially when it comes to the additional workload. The review could focus more on the effort involved rather than how to make it work effectively for long-term benefits for students. Have considerations been given to also be analyzed by the existing language advisor? Even if this review would show the benefits of extended language learning, the amendment doesn't show any commitment or action on it after. Without a clear action plan, with the best intention, there's a risk that this proposal will get shelved as priorities and governments change in the future. Because of all this, I cannot support the amendment, and I ask the Assembly to do the same. It's been mentioned before that mandating a language as a blanket approach, it can affect badly those that find it harder to learn languages or the neurodiverse students that might struggle. I truly want every child to have their needs catered for in schools and Jersey to be inclusive in its learning module in all aspects. However, the arguments just mentioned don't stand a bit, as the same would apply to the other core subjects mandated in the curriculum, as you can't honestly say that every child, with additional needs or not, is finding math or science easy, for example, but are needed life skills, and the curriculum on those adapts in the needed way for the ones struggling or needing special support. Languages in nowadays society are very much needed life skills too, to not be limited in opportunities by the country borders, and I'm sure that if we're looking for solutions to implement it instead of problems, we'll find it. We have to remember that the proposition mandates a language, but any can be chosen, and every school at present has the ability to provide at least an additional language. Now I'll share a bit more from my own experience, something I'm sure others can also relate to. I'm confident that if I hadn't been required to learn languages in school, I would not have pursued them all as my own choice. At that age, most students don't willingly take on extra work. If we gave them the option, they'd likely say no, not just to languages, but to other subjects like math, science, English too. Yet, we make certain subjects mandatory because we understand their long-term value in shaping a person's future and ongoing support them, and how ongoing support them in life. Looking back, the high school version of me probably would have chosen to study another language. But today, I'm incredibly grateful I was required to. Learning those languages opened doors I never could have imagined. Without them, I wouldn't have had the opportunities I have now. So let's ask ourselves, what opportunities has knowing another language brought to you? And if you don't speak another language, have you ever wished you did? What opportunities might you have missed because of it? Now let's think about the generations to come. Let's give them the ability to communicate, connect, study, work, and thrive in a multilingual world. Let's open the doors to a world full of opportunities, and let's support the original proposition to enable them to have that and reject the amendment. Thank you.
Could I just ask how many other members?
Sorry, would like to propose the adjournment, please.
Well, there's at least one other person wishing to speak. Deputy, could I have an indication from members if anyone who has not yet spoken wishes to speak? Deputy Catherine Curtis, I have your name already. Does anyone else? Deputy Doublé? Well, in which case there are at least two members still to speak, and then the summing up. We are almost at the point where standing orders require me to ask if the adjournment is proposed. The adjournment's been proposed. Is it seconded? Yes. Members agree? Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow.